afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kelly Himes, and I am the assigned administrative law judge for rulemaking 20-08-020, the revisit of the net energy metering tariffs, and also your facilitator for today's workshop on virtual net energy metering, which we will refer to as VNEM, and net energy metering aggregated. Also in attendance today are the Energy Division staff assigned to this aspect of the proceeding. We have analyst Brett Palmer, Erica Petrovsky, Sarah Lehrhaupt, and Chris Wessling, along with Energy Division Management Tori Francisco, and also President Alice Reynolds. My two objectives for today's workshops are first, to better understand the current sub-tariffs for VNEM and NEMA. And then my second objective is to discuss how a successor sub-tariff can be structured to ensure the statutory requirements are met, and that California climate policy objectives can be met. And then finally, to ensure that the mechanics of the sub-tariff will perform as needed. Before we begin today, I want to introduce the assigned commissioner for this proceeding, President Alice Reynolds, and she has some opening remarks. Please proceed.
Thank you, Judge Himes, and welcome everyone to this workshop on VNEM and NEMA. I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon. And as we heard from Judge Himes, our goals for the workshop are twofold. One, to gain a clearer understanding of how existing VNEM and NEMA tariffs work today. And two, to better understand the technical issues that VNEM and NEMA tariffs uniquely face under a successor tariff structure. And so just as a reminder, in the December 2022 net billing tariff decision, the Commission found that the record of the proceeding was insufficient to make a determination on VNEM and NEMA and required deeper review. We're here today to initiate that deeper review and to develop a more comprehensive record as we look toward aligning VNEM and NEMA with the net billing successor tariff structure. And as background, VNEM and NEMA were designed to allow multifamily and multi-tenant commercial properties, as well as agricultural customers, to install behind-the-meter renewables and participate in the NEM framework. Because VNEM serves multiple customers on one property and NEMA serves one customer across multiple properties, these tariffs are by nature complex, especially from a billing perspective, as I'm sure many of you know from hands-on experience. I am very glad that we're taking a deeper dive so we can walk away with a common understanding of the mechanics of the existing tariffs, as well as a joint understanding of the barriers and potential solutions to designing the next iteration of VNEM and NEMA. I'm sure that we can all agree that we want any future tariff to be as transparent and easy to understand for customers as possible, especially since VNEM serves renters who receive bill credits but are not part of the investment decision-making process. So with that, before turning it back over to Judge Himes, I did want to specifically thank Erica Petrovsky, Sarah Lehrhaupt, Brett Palmer, Chris Wessling, and Tori Francisco for putting on this workshop. And then also thank you very much to Judge Himes for moderating. So now I will turn it back to you, Judge Himes.
Thank you. So before we begin today, I wanted to go over the background, which President Reynolds just did for me. But again, Decision 2012-056 adopted the successor to the net energy metering tariff, now referred to, at least for now, as the net billing tariff. And related to today's workshop, in that decision, the Commission found that the record for VNEM and NEMA was insufficient and requires that deeper review, as President Reynolds referred to. So the Commission retained the two sub-tariffs as they are for now, with some caveats, which I won't go into. and required today's workshop to build a better understanding and improve the record. So now I'd like to go over our agenda for today. If we could get our agenda slide. Thank you. So I want to say, first of all, that today is a technical workshop solely to help everyone understand the mechanics of the current NEMA and VNEM subtariff. And then we'll spend some time on both of those, talking about the mechanics. And then we'll spend time discussing how the successor subtariffs can be structured to ensure that the statutory requirements are met, California climate policy objectives are met, and then that the mechanics of the successor will perform as needed. I want to underscore that there'll be no discussion on other aspects of this proceeding, and there aren't going to be any legal arguments for today. Today is just technical. I want to leave today better understanding both of these subtariffs, especially their mechanics. And so therefore, it would behoove all of us to make sure that I understand these. So next, I want to talk about how we're going to progress through the workshop. So if we could, already there, how to use the WebEx. So only our presenters will be able to be heard today. All other participants will be muted throughout the entire day. So I also want to remind our presenters, both the presenters and the panelists, to make sure they mute themselves when they're not speaking. I also ask that they have their cameras on when they are speaking. Participants, however, will be able to participate and ask questions through the chat feature in the lower right-hand corner of your screen on the WebEx. So to ask substantive questions, you would select all panelists, which is an option, and then type in your question. We also ask that you include your name and the organization you represent. For IT questions, just in case you're having issues, please use the chat function, but choose Brett Palmer instead. You can also email Brett at brett.palmer@cpuc.ca.gov. So if we could go back to the agenda slide. Thank you. So during the VNEM overview presentations at 1:15, we're going to have a couple different speakers give their perspective of how the current VNEM works. And during that time, if you have questions, go ahead and type them in as we just discussed. Staff will be collating those questions and they'll provide them to me. So our speakers and panelists won't have to worry about paying attention to multiple things. They just need to pay attention to giving their presentation and then answering the questions that attendees have provided to me. So once we have both the utility and industry perspectives, I'll proceed through those submitted questions to the presenters. If you have a follow-up question, go ahead and add that, but make sure you type in that it is a follow-up question. That way we can get to that. This is going to be the same format during the 3:15 presentations of the NEMA subtariff. So as you can see, we'll spend the first half of our afternoon talking about VNEM, and then we'll take a break, and the second half will be NEMA. So for both the 2 p.m. panel discussion and the 3:45 panel discussion, we are going to have different perspectives. We'll have a representative of the utilities, of the industry, as well as the customer perspective. And I've provided them some questions ahead of time so that they can prepare. During those panel discussions, again, if you have questions, type them in, and then you'll see at after we go through my questions, I will provide your questions to the panels. And that'll be about a 15-minute panel, or excuse me, a 15-minute Q&A session. And again, if there are follow-up questions, please denote them as follow-up. And then finally, at the end of the day, we're going to have a wrap-up and next steps, just a short overview of our next steps. And at that time, you'll be able to ask questions as well, again, through the Q&A. So let's do a practice run right now. If you have any questions before we begin, please type them into the Q&A now. And again, don't forget your name and the name of your organization. And in the meantime, we're going to pull our first presenters on the screen and advance to the first set of slides. Okay, it seems like we do have a question. This is from Claire Broom from 350 Bay Area. Claire, next time, please remember your affiliation, but I know who you are. Thank you. Claire asked, the ruling introducing the workshop mentioned discussion of approach to evaluation. Is that on the agenda? Actually, no, this is not. This workshop is solely to discuss VNEM and NEMA. I would have to go back and, oh, the ruling. Okay. The ruling does discuss that, but the evaluation will be addressed through the questions that were provided. So today is solely about understanding VNEM and NEMA. Okay, we have a second question, and the question is it possible to treat VNEM for SOMA and MASH differentiated from market rate VNEM in terms of delivering energy equity? And I think that is a question, that is a technical question that we can ask our panelists later for the day. So I'm going to ask our staff if they can hold on to that question and wait for later in the day. And I don't see any other questions right now. So at this time, let me just ask Brett if our first panelist is ready to go.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, then I want to introduce our first speaker. And I apologize ahead of time, I did not get the pronunciation of your name, but representing the utility perspective on the mechanics of the current VNEM subtariff, we have Edwin Castano from Southern California Edison. And if you could make sure that let me know that I pronounced your name correctly. Tell us what your title is, and then go ahead and start with your presentation.
Hello, Commissioner Himes. This is Edwin. I just go by Edwin Castano. That's how I pronounce it, but it's normal. So thank you very much for introducing me. I'm here to talk to you guys about the VNEM tariffs. I'm a senior manager at of customer generation programs in Southern California, Edison. I oversee everything that has to do with the customer owning generation RDF facilities in the service territory, including the NEM tariffs and now the new MBT schedule. But I oversee the SGIP, the SOMA, the DACSASH, all of the green access programs that follows under my supervision at Southern California Edison. So today I'm gonna limit it to VNEM. So if somebody can just skip to the next slide. A little bit about regulatory background. You should be familiar with this. The first version of VNEM came as part of the implementation of the MASH program. The Commission found a way to make sure that the energy production of the MASH systems were properly allocated to the tenants that were participating in the multifamily housing complex. So back in 2028, what was the first version of the VNEM? And that's how it's called. Now remember that MASH has closed, so this is a program that is now closed for new participants, but we continue to have, of course, the systems that were installed as part of MASH still in production. So this tariff still continues to be applicable today. Couple of years later, maybe 3 years later, the Commission expanded the VNEM structure to what we call the market rates, which means that you do not need to be in MASH or be in affordable housing to participate in the VNEM structure. Essentially, is the same, although kind of a main difference back then was that it limited the system to the single point of common coupling, which is kind of the point of interconnection, had to be the same. Since then, that has been modified a couple of times, but currently, from the standpoint view of Edison, they're pretty much similar, the MASH and the market rate VNEM. And finally, in 2020 and 2017, the Commission created SOMA, and as part of that program, very similar to MASH, we implemented the SOMA VNEM, SOMA Virtual NEM schedule. All of the three programs are still again open within Southern California Edison, even though the MASH program has closed to business, it's still open for interconnections as of today. Can we just go to the next slide? So for very simplified version, little graphic there. The idea behind the VNEM system is that we're gonna have a generation system located at the customer premises. That generation system is metered by something that we call a net generator output meter. In Southern California, Edison, we call it the NJOM. And the idea behind that is that we're going to be able to measure 100% of the production of that system. There is a requirement that that meter is measuring in 15 minutes interval, and that there is no retail load serving behind that meter. This should be only for the system. There's sometimes some auxiliary load that runs into that meter, but should be minimal. It's not intended for a tenant to be behind that meter. We want to capture 100% of the production, of the net production, into that meter. There might be a question later about energy storage attached to that generation. And in Southern California Edison, it is totally okay to add energy storage behind the same NJOM, so long as the NJOM captures the output of the two systems. And there's some restrictions about how the energy storage needs to be charged, but besides that, there's really no restriction on adding energy storage to that configuration. The solar system output comes 100% into our grid. We measure 100%, is considered, for all the intent and purposes, is considered an export system. When the customer submits a request for interconnection, we study that similar to any other Rule 21 project. We study the impact on the system, the transformation required, regardless of how many units that power is going to be allocated. This is treated as a 100% export system. Then on a monthly basis, we take that those readings, we break that down by time of use. We have a table that the system owner provides to us. It gives us percentages. So unit number 1, 2%, unit number 10, 50%, whatever the allocation is, we take that into consideration, and then we allocate the kilowatt hours by time of use to each of those accounts. So that's kind of the front end of the generation system. And then in the next slide, I'll tell you a little bit about what we do in the billing system for those calculations. First of all, for MASH and the VNEM, we require that the benefiting accounts, the ones that are receiving these kilowatt hours allocation, they need to be on the time of use. The exception to that is SOMA. SOMA has a specific exception that the customer may request if they choose to move to a non-time of use rate that the customer is eligible to. The reason is because we allocate these credits in time of use period. We want to be able to offset those kilowatt hours, the usage in each time of use period with the kilowatt hours that are allocated per customer. So from all intent and purposes, it looks like we are just reducing or providing a credit on kilowatt hours to each of the time of use periods for the customer. And then for each time of use, we treat it exactly like we do for NEM currently. If in each time of use the customer has more credits than usage, we call that a net generator. If in each time of use period for the month the customer has more usage than credits, then we call that a net consumption, and we applied pretty much a one-to-one offset of the energy allocated to that account per time of use period. We calculate exactly as we calculate them. So this is, again, for the purpose of calculating the NEM credit, pretty much works the same. The only difference, of course, is that the energy comes from a system down the street or down at the corner instead of a system that is actually behind the meter, and we do that calculation manually. The rules for settlements work exactly the same. We have a relevant period, which is a 12-month. Customers can roll over credits that are not being used. They can roll it over for the next month. And at the end of the 12-month settlement period, we do a calculation, and they can forfeit credits if they haven't used it. And we also apply the rules for net surplus compensation. So it's the similar construct as the current net structure. And of course, they also MVCs are also applicable to these tariffs. As you can tell, then the generator account is giving away all of the kilowatt hours to benefiting accounts. So what's left on the generator account is a statement. We issue a statement. There's some basic billing fees there, but there shouldn't be any usage really at the generator account because they have given all of the generation to somebody else. But they get a monthly breakdown on the kilowatt hours that were assigned to each of the benefiting accounts. One of the issues that we're going to discuss later is that the customer, the tenant, may not want to share that information with the bill with the system owner. Sometimes the system owner has difficulty trying to understand how those kilowatt hours were applied and how much are the savings. I understand that there's some requirements on calculating savings, especially for some of the low-income finance projects. That is private to the tenant. So sometimes we have to go above and beyond to try to provide enough information to the generated account, to the system owner, for them to be able to calculate those type of system of net benefits to the account, because that information is private to the tenant. So that's one of the complications trying to explain, and trying to audit these systems is rather a difficult task for the generator owner. I mentioned before, the MVCs work the same as the NEM 2.0. The way I described today this billing is applicable to SEE. I believe there's some minor tweaks, minor differences between us and the other utilities, but generally this is the way that the billing is accounted for the VNEM in a service territory. I think that's my last slide, by the way. So I think I open it to Commissioner for any questions that you guys may have.
Okay, thank you, Edwin. Actually, we're going to have all of the presentations first, and then we'll bring it up for questions, just in case it's the same question for each of the presenters. So, so at this time, I'd like to bring up the industry perspective on the mechanics. And we have Ali DiTrio. Ali, are you with us?
Times, can you hear me?
There you are, yes.
Great, thank you for the opportunity to speak today and for hosting this workshop. Thank you, President Reynolds, for attending today's workshop, and for all the staff for your hard work in putting this together. We really appreciate the invitation. So I'm Ali DiTrio. I'm the policy advisor for Ivy Energy. We also have our founder and CEO from Ivy Energy on the call today, Dover Janice. We're going to talk a little bit about virtual net metering for multi-unit buildings and some of the nuances of this tariff that we think are important for the Commission to understand. So next slide, please. So just oh, this looks like it was a merged slide. So just a quick overview of VNEM for multifamily buildings. VNEM is a tariff arrangement that enables a multi-meter property owner to allocate the property's shared solar systems energy credits to tenants. And the intent of VNEM is really to help tenants receive the direct benefits of the building solar system rather than all of the benefits going to the building owner. So this is really important to highlight because VNEM serves as one of the only pathways for those that don't own property, renters, to benefit directly from on-site clean energy. And so this is really a tariff that's been designed for equity purposes, and we think that it's very important that the tariff be maintained and improved to make sure that it's continuing to provide these important equity and environmental justice benefits. One thing we want to highlight is that there's been significant growth in the multifamily solar market in the past 3 years. In 2019, the non-MASH VNEM was under 30 megawatts, and today we have over 87 megawatts installed today, which represents a nearly 300% increase in just 3 years. Part of that is due to Title 24 and making sure that new multifamily construction has on-site solar and storage, and property owners are now seeing that complying with Title 24, on-site DERs are more cost-effective and they're better for the grid than community solar that's installed in a remote area that still requires transmission distribution. So on-site clean energy has a lot more benefits for the grid, for reducing demands, and overall the system. But VNEM still represents less than 1% of the installed capacity of the overall NEM program. It was slow to get off the ground when it was initially created, but one of the reasons that it has now experienced such tremendous growth in the past couple of years is because the split incentive problem is finally been solved, and it's now driving a lot of growth. So Ivy, as one example, is working on over 160 VNEM projects right now. Most of them are privately funded, and we're able to monetize the solar asset without including any of the costs in the housing or renting costs. And VNEM, we think, has the potential to be as successful as net metering if it's given the proper runway for renters to benefit in proportion to the homeowner counterparts through the regular NEM program. And I can't stress this enough that VNEM is helping apartment owners install clean energy to the benefit of tenants. VNEM primarily serves renting populations. We put a lot of testimony on the record that shows more than 45% of Californians are renters, and renters are overwhelmingly communities from the environmental and social justice community. Most are low income, and most low income customers are living in general market housing. Deed restricted affordable housing for the SOMA program is very limited. There's only about 400,000 units there. So most of the ESJ communities that the commission is looking to serve are renters and living in general market housing. And so it's very important to note that equity and environmental justice goals are being served with the VNEM program. Next slide, please. So I want to just highlight a couple different multifamily solar designs that I think are important for the commission to note. These are a few different of the topologies. And again, this graphic came right from our testimony that was submitted in the record in the earlier proceeding. The 4A figure, there's a couple different ways to design solar for multifamily. I'm going to focus on the third one here. Where, with virtual net metering, the utilities have developed a metering and billing system that allows the shared economic benefits of on-site solar generation. The power from the solar system flows to a common electrical panel or bus bar, and it allows for the building owners and residents to receive credits for the solar generation proportional to their total usage. In order to allocate this shared generation, VNEM interconnections are not measured with bidirectional smart meters. Total generation is measured directly off the PV system as shown in 4C, and the usage is measured on the customer side, which is served by both the PV system and the utility. And the total generation is then allocated on a per unit basis based on each unit's percentage of total building usage or the benefiting account list process. So I want to stress here that there are different configurations, but the one that we are most commonly seeing now is the one in 4C, which again has two different ways of measuring the generation on one side and the usage on the customer side. Next slide, please. So VNEM systems serve on-site load, and I really want to emphasize this point and the physics behind this point because it's really important for determining the next steps in the successor tariff, especially when it comes to analyzing the costs and benefits of VNEM systems. So Kirchhoff's current law is the principal mechanism with how this is being proved through the laws of physics. Power flows in a multifamily building follow the same laws of conservation of energy as a single facility NEM system. And Kirchhoff's current law governs how current flows through a circuit and how voltage varies around a loop in a circuit. So if the energy generated on site on the property is greater than or equal to the energy required by the loads, then all the loads are served by the on-site generation. And if the energy generated is less than the energy required by the loads, the difference is served by the utility grid. Kirchhoff's law essentially states that current will flow first to wherever there is least resistance. In a VNEM arrangement for multifamily buildings, the current from the generating facility will flow to the on-site load because it's least resistant than exporting directly from the grid. And I'll also note that this applies on a neighborhood basis on a feeder as well. If one neighbor has solar and the other does not, and the solar generation is being exported on the feeder, it will go to the next neighbor over that has a load that needs to be served. Electricity is not flowing all the way up to the transmission system and back down to serve the load. It's going wherever there's least resistance within the same feeder. Another thing to note is that there are different kinds of interconnection for multifamily buildings. We see both line side and load side caps. I'm not going to go into all the differences between the two, but they both serve on-site load in multifamily buildings. And most new projects designed under Title 24 are using the load side cap and making space directly on the bus bar for solar, which then allows the on-site loads to be served as the generation flows through the bus bar to the service disconnect. This is all important because I want to emphasize for things that were said in the record in the proceeding, the VNEM tariff meters generation as all export for accounting purposes only, but the electrons are physically serving the on-site load. Next slide, please. And so you can see this illustrated in a multifamily design here for a load side connection, where you see at night, the grid is serving, in the first diagram, you can see the grid is serving the full load, and all of the benefiting meters are receiving that, and all of the nodes essentially add up to zero through Kirchhoff's law and the law of conservation. And you can see in a sunny day where the PV system is generating and each of the different benefiting meters have different loads, that those are being served by the PV system, and then the grid is providing any of the difference. So I just want to, again, highlight some of the technical details associated with multifamily design and interconnection here. Next slide, please. So that brings us to VNEM billing and account management. So I just want to highlight some of the things building off of the presentation from Southern California Edison with generating accounts and benefiting accounts. So generating accounts measure the solar production to calculate the NEM credit. And under the current tariff rules, the generating account is not permitted to have load under the current tariff. So we have some ideas about how that could be changed to better facilitate storage that we'll get into in the panel. And the benefiting account are the tenant meters, plus any common area meters that are also considered benefiting. Those benefiting accounts are allocated a share of the NEM credit each meter that is opted in. And benefiting accounts, again, do have load. The net generation output meter measures the net output to the grid. And I want to emphasize too, netting is very important in VNEM arrangements. Netting occurs in 15-minute intervals, and it must be maintained in the VNEM tariff in order to properly measure on-site consumption versus grid imports at multifamily buildings. Again, because of the design I showed earlier, where production and consumption are measured separately. So in essence, there is kind of already a net billing structure with the VNEM tariff, in that production and consumption are measured separately instead of with a single bidirectional meter like a residential NEM system does. I want to also talk a little bit more about the benefiting account list. So what happens when we set up a VNEM system? An apartment owner designates individual meters in the benefiting account list. Utilities charge fees for the initial establishment of benefiting account list and updates the benefiting account list. If a tenant moves out, the NEM credits for that benefiting account go to a backup account instead of staying with that meter, unless there is continuous account ownership where all of the meters are under an account, the property owner's account. And we think that might be able to be changed where they should just continue to stay with that meter for ease of use. One thing we want to highlight for the commission is that the utility timelines for updating benefiting account lists and responding for customer requests for changes are uncertain and very, very slow. And we think that this can be dramatically improved for both the customer experience, but also the utility experience versus dealing with lots of one-off requests. We have ideas on how this could be improved. And we've also noted from our experience in the field that customers have reported that utilities have sometimes needed to retroactively credit accounts or fix mistakes, or there's really long delays in crediting. And I see from one of the panelists that there's clearly other issues, that need to be addressed with ensuring that bill credits are being allocated to benefiting accounts. Again, these are renters that are often low-income communities of color, and making sure that they are properly receiving the benefits of the system is really important for promoting equity in this program. And then the last thing I'll mention on equity is if the account is in the owner's name, there's no way for the tenants to get discounted rates for that unit, even if they're income qualified. So we really do need to find a way to allow for income qualified customers to verify their income so they can continue to get care discounts, even if they're not in the customer's name. So that's one thing we want to highlight for the commission as well in the VNEM account management. Next slide, please. I'll just quickly go through the interconnection challenges here. So multifamily retrofits, the utilities are not uniform in their treatment of interconnection applications. Some utilities require each interconnection point to submit its own VNEM application, even though the facilities are all one project at one customer property. One thing that's really been an issue lately is that some utilities require a site visit before deeming applications complete. And because they control the scheduling of these site visits, it can really impact the ability of customers to complete interconnection applications in a timely manner. And some utilities will not deem applications complete without a complete benefiting account list, which is not always possible for various reasons. And we've also seen that requests for basic info like meter numbers and customer data are really slow, which really hampers the ability for customers to complete interconnection applications in a timely manner with all the required info. And so with new construction, the other issues that we see with VNEM that are kind of distinct from a regular NEM system is that meter numbers are required for submitting applications, but oftentimes we can't get the meter numbers for new construction right away. We also would like to see that for new construction that load submissions or allowing for the plots to be designated as part of the interconnection application. That way we're able to continue moving forward with the project and know that we have an interconnection application submitted and deemed complete. And so we really want to make sure that, again, a lot of these developers that are now really trying to comply with Title 24, that are really trying to help, advance our ESG goals, that we're making it easier for them, not harder. And the last thing I'll emphasize is that changes in project scope, even if very small, reducing system sizes or having to change the number of interconnections due to site issues, that can also result in significant time delays. And so as we consider, the nuances of VNEM interconnection, we wanted to make the Commission aware of some of these challenges and where there's opportunity to improve. Next slide, please. And I'll let Dover, my CEO, take over from here just to close us all out.
Thanks, Allie. And we'll go quick because I know we are a little bit behind schedule here. So we wanted to just provide a process diagram of how we interpret virtual net metering so that we can, again, be on the same page here. So as mentioned earlier, there's a net generation output meter that monitors the performance of the distributed energy resource. The BEL percentage, the benefiting account list, will dictate the percentage that is applied to that account. And I think there is a little bit of confusion across the board on if that's done at a 15-minute level or a time of use level across all three utilities. So I will point that out, and I think that is a good topic to talk about here shortly. And I just want to point out that this requires custom utility infrastructure, which I think we can all agree is burdensome at the utility level, separate to the standard net metering program. More to discuss there. And at the end of the day, this goes into a similar process as net metering to create the net metering bill at the account level, but requires some custom infrastructure to get that done because of the benefiting account list and VNEM aspects. A couple of things to observe here is that the way that this fixed allocation works, it doesn't necessarily incorporate the load variance that you're going to see. In apartment buildings, you will have one unit use a fraction of the power that another unit might use. And this also may change by season, tenancy, and there's a lot of different variables that will make usage variable. So in order to really serve the grid and incentivize usage behavior within these communities, we want to just point out that right now a fixed BEL percentage may not be the best design with VNEM in capturing all the opportunities available with optimizing the net load profile of these multifamily communities. So I think that's important to keep in mind here as we have this discussion, which kind of leads us, I think, into our next topic of we believe there is improvement that can be discussed, and we're looking forward to talking about those ideas. At Ivy, we definitely have some things to bring to the table, and we're excited to engage in this dialogue. And that is all.
Okay, thank you. Thank you both. Let's go ahead. We have one more presentation for this overview section. Because there are some differences from the general VNEM subtariff and the SOMA and MASH, I wanted to have someone speak to those differences. So with us today is Hannah Keenan, and Hannah is going to talk specifically about SOMA. Hannah, are you with us?
I am. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Fabulous. Thank you so much, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Hannah Keenan, and I'm a SOMA program manager. And today I will be speaking about VNEM in the context of the SOMA program. Next slide, please. So the Solar on Multifamily Affordable Housing Program services properties through the participating IOUs of PG&E, SCE, SDG&E, Pacificor, and Liberty. The SOMA VNEM tariffs provide a mechanism for allocating bill credits from the system generation among the property occupants for tenant and common area electric accounts. These units must be separately metered and eligible for a VNEM tariff to participate in SOMA, with a minimum of 5 units on the property. AB 693 and CPUC decision 17-12-022 provide specific guidance and mandates about VNEM for SOMA implementation, and each IOU established a tariff specific to their service territory. Next slide. Can I have the next slide, please? Perfect, thank you. Assembly Bill 693 requires the CPUC to ensure that utility bill reductions are achieved through tariffs that allow for the allocation of credits, such as virtual net metering tariffs that are designed for SOMA participants, or other tariffs may be adopted for the Commission pursuant to Section 2827.1. I think that advanced 2 slides if we go back. I'll keep going. These will catch up. VNEM is the mechanism to allocate solar credits to the tenant and common area units, as I mentioned, which in turn allows the tenants to receive the direct economic benefits through the bill impacts. And with SOMA, all third-party ownership systems are required to provide operations, maintenance, and monitoring services through the full term of the third-party ownership agreement. Additionally, third-party owned systems must include performance guarantees, which ensures the system will produce a minimum of 90% of the expected annual output. Next slide, please. So SOMA utilizes the VNEM to provide an economic benefit for the qualifying energy system through VNEM. The PV system is directly tied to the grid, not the building meter. A specific PV electric meter ensures the system's production and sends it to the grid. Per decision 17-12-022, existing VNEM tariffs could be used as the basis for new or modified tariffs for the implementation of SOMA. The decision also required the IOUs to file Tier 1 advice letters designating the VNEM tariff that SOMA participants should use, which we will discuss in the forthcoming slides. To ensure the majority of tenant benefit for SOMA systems, the program implemented a requirement that at least 51% of the systems must serve tenant load. The direct economic benefit is provided through VNEM bill credits, and the program mandates that the tenants cannot receive rent or utility allowance adjustments based on their solar credits. This is required through the affidavit ensuring 100% tenant economic benefit, which is a part of the application documentation that we also use to ensure that the requirement is met for the program. Additionally, the decision exempts SOMA participants from the requirement of a mandatory TOU rate for tenant customers, and I know Edwin mentioned with SCE they have the right to opt out. As mentioned on the previous slide as well, third-party owned systems are also subject to performance guarantees. Next slide, please. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the SOMA program providing our VNEM tariff summary sheet. So I've included a link to where that is hosted on the calsoma.org website. Similarly, each of the IOU's tariffs cover similar content around eligibility, definitions, billing costs, system specifications, and direct access and CCA customers. Each utility does have their own naming convention, which I've included on the slide for reference. I also wanted to call out that this information summarizing the overlapping content is very similar across each of the IOU's tariff language, and a few of these points include the appropriate system sizing for 12 months consumption data, common area accounts required to take TOU rates, but it's not mandatory for tenants. If defaulted, as mentioned with SCE, there's an option to opt out. The excess billing credits are carried over to the following month. there is a slight variation for the net surplus calculations. Customers must pay the non-bypassable charges for each kilowatt hour of energy consumed. Interconnection costs must align with Rule 21. And going back to the decision, adopting the general eligibility requirement that properties with CCA customers may participate if the serving CCA has a VNEM tariff. Next slide, please. So aside from these similarities from the previous slide, these tariffs do have some variance in language around the allocation terms. PG&E, SCE, and SDG&E do specify the allocation will remain in effect for 20 years, which aligns with the program's interconnection performance and permanency requirements that the equipment must be installed for a minimum of 20 years when operating under SOMA. The decision also outlines the intention that low-income tenants participating in this program will receive the full economic benefit of the generation allocated to them through the VNEM tariff for the life of the SOMA system. This is further supported by the program's implementation of the tenant benefit affidavit, as I mentioned earlier. The process of retention for the credits for a unit's vacancy is also included for SDG&E, PG&E, and PacifiCorp's tariff language, but not outlined specifically for SCE or Liberty in the tariff language. Next slide, please. And thank you so much for the opportunity to speak a little bit more about SOMA and how VNEM relates to the SOMA program and is utilized with our participants.
Okay, thank you. Had a little technical difficulty here. So we have several questions, and we still have 3 of our 4 presenters. Edwin, if you could join us again. I believe I have several questions directly for you.
Sure.
So let me just bring those up. Sorry, the difficult part of trying to run a workshop remotely. So this question is from Sunrun. Is it possible to treat VNEM? Well, actually, I think this could be for all of you. Is it possible to treat VNEM for SOMA and MASH differentiated from market rate VNEM in terms of delivering energy equity?
Yeah, I don't see it. This is Edwin again. I don't see why not, but at the same time, as we just heard, these programs are complicated to explain.
Oh, I think we lost you, Edwin.
Maybe I can chime in while Edwin's coming back.
Okay.
You know, we think there is an important distinction to be made with SOMA versus general market VNEM. You know, SOMA is a more of a subsidy program for deed restricted affordable housing. So I think that it may be on a different track in terms of whether it should have a successor or whether the program guidelines should be altered in any way, because it is kind of serving that very unique segment of the market. But, you know, the virtual net metering program as a whole is really promoting energy equity, as I stated in my presentation. So I think there's probably a way to thread the needle with making sure that refinements to the VNEM general market tariff are done in a way that helps improve installations at apartment buildings. And maybe some of that could be improved for SOMA as well, but we do want to maintain the distinction between SOMA and general market VNEM because of SOMA's, again, very explicit directives to serve deed restricted affordable housing and the way that the incentives and subsidies for that program work compared to a general market VNEM tariff.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for jumping in. I think since we have temporarily lost Edwin, I'm
back. I'm back.
you're back.
Yes,
Okay.
sorry about that. Technical difficulties again.
I completely understand.
Particularly, I don't have any issues with different programs. But like I said before, I think the difficulty is a lot on the billing requirements that we have to build to explain to the customer and to the system owner how these credits are allocated. I think I think if it makes sense. I don't have any personal opposition to different treatments so long as they follow the principles of the of this proceeding on making sure that cost shift is reduced or eliminated, and that all of the participants are properly encouraged to adopt this. And of course, for low income, I don't have any specific suggestions right now, but I don't have any reason to believe that a different schema cannot work for them.
Okay, thank you. So there is a question on netting, but I think I'm going to hold that question to our panel discussion because we're going to talk about that a lot. So Tori, if you could hold that question back, question number 2. And that question was actually from Dover, but we're going to hold that back. There is a question, how does each utility make sure that their VNEM billing system is accurately providing a credit to a benefiting account number? So that's to you, Edwin. It's from Scott at Sunrun.
Oh, certainly. We actually have this question asked a lot. Like I mentioned before, we have had many requests from the system owners to for us to document how the credits are allocated to each account benefiter. Each of the account beneficiaries are treated very similar to NEM, so that's not the issue. What we encounter difficulties on is trying to bring in all that information from the customers, from the tenants, for visibility to the system owner. In particular, the ability to demonstrate the savings, which is something that a lot of the financial banks require to continue the loans for this company. So we do have, again, we have systems to audit how these rates are calculated. Most of these systems now for SCE, since we transitioned to SAP, are automated. When we are asked for a specific detail, we provide that to them. The difficulty, of course, is putting all the information together and providing it to somebody without any permission from the system owner.
Okay, thank you. Next question. I think this would be for everyone, but Edwin, I'll start with you. This is a question from Perry Kososha from Vote Solar. Does VNEM work for retail customers or tenants, for example, in a strip mall?
I can take that. Yeah. Or Edwin, if you'd like.
Yeah, go ahead. That's fine.
I was just going to say, yes, it does work
Yeah.
for multimeter strip malls.
Okay. That was a quick bottom line yes. There is another question from Jean Armstrong about netting. And again, I'm going to hold that question until our panel discussion, but I wanted to make sure that she knew that we were not skipping over it. A question for Ivy from our energy division, from Dan Bush. How do you ensure no double crediting of solar generation in the 4C configuration?
I think I can take that, Allie, if you'd like. So maybe the diagram wasn't straightforward, but Allie explained the load is being metered by the utility, and the connection point of the system is being metered separately. So there wouldn't be double dipping. The power is coming from the grid and the solar system, but it's being accounted for separately. So there wouldn't be any double dipping because it's not actually behind a load meter. Does that make sense? I know, I guess,
Well, the
if you want to
second,
clarify here.
the second part of Dan's question is if the solar is directly offsetting load, reducing metered imports, but is measured and credited based on the NGOM, don't we have a potential double counting issue?
Well, accounting wise, the generation is completely separate to the load that's being metered. So from a billing perspective, it's not double counting. The big question though, I don't want to get too far off your specific question, but that is part of the problem here, that we're not actually doing that math to figure out what truly is export or what's import. It's not being accounted for in any way right now.
Okay, thank you. One last question. Under Public Utilities Code Section 218B1 and 216, a multifamily project owner with a behind-the-meter system does not become a regulated electrical corporation by selling power to its own tenants. Why would a multifamily project owner use VNEM as opposed to just act as a single customer to the utility and then privately charge tenants privately for the power, either on a metered basis or fixed charge basis? And this is from Ariel Strauss from Small Business Utility Advocates.
Maybe I can take this one. You know, that is correct that a multifamily owner could choose to just have a single, essentially they could do master metering, I think is what she's referring to, where, you know, the multifamily owner can have a single meter for commercial and just, you know, sub-meter individual tenants, so long as they are not charging more than the tenants would otherwise receive if service was being individually metered. And there may be some benefits to doing that versus doing individual meters. But one of the main benefits of VNEM is that when you do have individually metered tenant accounts, that you are able to aggregate the benefits and distribute the benefits of the solar system. So it really is another way to provide savings to tenants in a way that you may not with master metering.
I'll add on to that it'd be really expensive to retrofit a building to master metered if you already have individual meters, which is largely the case for most multifamily buildings.
And I have something to add as well. It's like we do have examples for market VNEM where a single entity chooses to be the owner of the generator account as well as the benefiting accounts. What we have seen though is that if the entity, let's just say MON, for example, wants to do that, then any specific needs for each of the tenants are hidden behind the same entity. And you cannot replicate this with housing development because then the individual tenants will not be eligible for care or any low income. So there's some consequences of trying to be the sole administrator of that billing arrangement, which again for low income and for other rate classes might not be the way to go. So, but it is possible. It is possible that the same person that owns the master account can have one of these arrangements and individually bill their tenants for the usage, but it loses access to other programs, as I mentioned before.
Great. Thank you all. I'm going to ask everyone to hold their questions now. I want to go ahead and segue into our panel discussion. I feel like we're already there, having everyone jumping in back and forth. So I believe we have everyone. We have Edwin. Could we also get Justin Ong brought up from Cal Advocates? Ali Ditrio is staying with us. And then Hannah is also staying with us. And we're going to move into our panel questions. And again, this is, we've talked about what VNEM is like now. So now we're going to talk about what the current problems are. Obviously, there's some problems with billing. We've already discussed that. And I want to continue with these barriers, these current problems, and then as we proceed through the next 40 minutes or so, we'll talk about storage. There's a couple questions on our Q&A about storage. I'll bring those back. I'll ask staff to hold on to those, bring those back. And again, we're going to talk about netting. So first up, do we have everyone? Is Justin with us?
I'm here.
Okay. The way my screen is configured, I can only see 4 people at a time. So welcome, Justin. So again, these questions are solely with respect to VNEM. So we just heard how the current subtariff works, and again, a little bit about those current barriers. Let's talk about what the obstructions are. Let me welcome Justin and begin with him. What do you feel are some of the current barriers and problems, or rather, what are the barriers and problems of the current VNEM tariff?
Yeah, happy to tackle that. And thank you again for the opportunity to speak here today, Judge Himes. We heard a lot today about the specifics of the VNEM tariff, but I wanted to take this chance, kicking off the panel, to zoom out to more of a 30,000-foot perspective and really emphasize the core problem that Cal advocates vocalized throughout the proceeding. And that's the cost shift. The cost shift created by net energy metering and by association VNEM really creates an extra financial burden on ratepayers that don't go solar, and that number is significant and growing. We estimated that the cost shift last year was over $4 billion alone, or 10 to 20% of the average customer's bill. So even with the reform contained in last December's net billing tariff, we expect this number to continue to grow over the next few years. So with that cost shift growth as background, we generally see the current issues with the VNEM tariff as problematic because it disproportionately increases the cost shift because it's more based on a NEM 2.0 structure relative to the net billing tariff. So we commend the December decision to limit the legacy period to 9 years and more rigorously define eligibility criteria for NEM A, but would like to keep the cost shift in mind as we hammer out future improvements and talk about the merits of different approaches. So aside from that, we think that there's a lot of complexity, and we really need to update the tariff to provide more consistency and make it easier to understand the different tariffs and options that customers have, in particular for low-income customers. As we heard from the Edison representative, there's a variety of different tariffs open today. The NASH tariff, for example, is still open to select customers, although the program itself has expired. And the future of SOMA in the tariffs associated with it are relatively uncertain as well. So we think clarifying those different tariff options and looking for ways to consistently update them is a very common sense thing to do. And last, I would just close with exploring different alternatives outside of the tariffs directly identified for this workshop. I think it's a natural time, given the inflection point of where we're at with these tariffs, to consider other alternatives, such as community solar that may be able to deliver the same access, solar access to multifamily homes and other customers that that may have lacked access previously when the tariffs were first developed. And so with community solar and green access programs in particular, there's actually a proceeding going on right now that is actively underway and is targeting a proposed decision in Q3 of this year. And so I think it's a very timely moment to consider other tariffs and programs that may be ripe for consolidation as we consider solutions here.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Justin. And again, welcome. Let me turn to both Ali and Dover and Hannah. Aside from the billing issues for VNEM, are there other aspects that create barriers?
Yeah, thanks. Before I answer your question, I just wanted to respond to some of the things that were mentioned by Cal advocates, especially regarding the cost shift. One, the VNEM program is only 1% of the overall NEM program, so it's proverbially a drop in the bucket compared to the rest of the net metering program. Two, multifamily there's inherent cost shifts in rate design, and multifamily buildings serve many customers under one roof. So there's actually a cost shift even when you're not considering solar from multifamily buildings to single family homes. And that's something that has been stated by numerous energy economic experts. And we'd welcome the opportunity for the commission to do more analysis on the full cost of service for multifamily buildings and how their grid impacts differ from that of a one-to-one single family home. Just by virtue of there being many customers under one roof at a single service delivery point makes there not be a cost shift. And second, with on-site solar in particular, there are a number of additional benefits like demand management and actual on-site load reduction, as we mentioned in our testimony, that can help reduce costs for ratepayers compared to community solar, which still uses transmission distribution infrastructure, which requires new land development and essentially is a remote generation resource. So we just want to highlight the tremendous opportunities for grid benefits and customer cost reduction with on-site solar, and as well with multifamily buildings, because you have the opportunity to install solar and have so many more opportunities to serve on-site load with different tenant loads at different times. You're not exporting anywhere near as much energy from a multifamily building, and basically all VNEM systems are on the same feeder. So the impact to the grid is quite minimal. And so we just want to highlight that in all this discussion about the cost shift, there was no analysis of multifamily and VNEM in the NEM 2 look back study. And we think that, before further changes are made, it would be quite prudent to do a full study on the costs and benefits of multifamily VNEM and really look at this in the grand scheme of things of how small the program is to date. And then again, how this differs from a regular single family home system. And I'll let Dover take the questions on the billing.
Thanks, Ali. So looking at specific obstructions, the largest barrier in the way here for the market is really the split incentive issue, which is driven from administrative challenges. It's just not simple or clear for the decision maker to invest in a shared on-site renewable energy system And that problem really is driven from many of the things that were discussed already in terms of complication, lack of support, IT infrastructure. And so I'll keep my answer short there, but the split incentive issue has been the problem. I mean, that's why we're here helping the market in what we do as a service provider, trying to help these stakeholders. So that really is the largest barrier to point out that is driven from the administrative topics that have already been discussed in the last hour.
Okay, thank you. Edwin, from the utilities perspective, do you also see the split incentive as being the main obstacle?
Yeah, that's one of the main difficulties for us to try to explain the economics of each system. I do want to first support the reason why we are in this proceeding is because we saw the cost shift. We may or may not agree that enough evidence is on the record to actually point at the cost shift that is the systems are actually producing, but there is some cost shift. So we do believe that that we need to evaluate the compensation or the value that is given to these electrons for these systems. But I also want to point out a couple of things. The first one is that based on a very high level analysis that we've made for the SOMA projects, more than a third of them, because of the eligibility of the program, is based on geographic locations that allows benefiting accounts to be across the street or in near parcels. And the recent modification of the property definition under VNEM, more than a third of these projects are actually located in different feeders. So that is a problem. We have to discuss that later. But again, overall, the problems are cost shift, difficulty on understanding the bill is very complicated, and try to simplify this as much as possible.
Okay, thank you. And Hannah, I didn't want to forget you. Would you like to add anything?
From the program side.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
So we're talking about cost shift. I would like to turn our attention more to the actual cost. There were some comments on the proposed decision that argued about the project cost assumptions, particularly those about the VNEM system cost and payback periods. Ivy had stated that one reason to use alternate cost assumptions is that multifamily buildings cannot be treated as an apples to apples comparison with single family homes, or for that matter, single facility commercial buildings. So how do you think that the commission should account for not only the variation there, but also the system size variation? And I'll turn that to either Dover or Allie.
Yeah, I can take that question. And this is such a important thing to talk about. So grateful that we're all having this dialogue today. When we're looking at the cost to serve a multifamily building, I'll provide an example. We're working on we're a sub on a project, a market rate yet affordable market rate housing project here in San Diego that is receiving some support through the California Energy Commission. And it's very exciting because the project's being designed with enough solar and storage to be able to island and operate as its own power source. Yet there's complication because that's borderline not even possible to do in the state of California right now. And so when we look at costs, when we have a lot of load and we have the ability to serve that load with an on-site clean resource and the ability to install storage and control different loads within that property, I think it's very important to first monitor and meter the net impact at these communities with the grid before we do anything. That'll give us a better idea. And we haven't seen that data in the look back study. That data is not currently provided. So I think in order to understand cost, we should look at net load impact with the grid of these multifamily communities with solar, enable storage, and then we should look at how that compares to the residential market in order to get a better grip on cost. So in terms of cost, I think we really need to start with, we need to get the data, and we need to look at how this customer segment is different than single family. And so that's one aspect, is just having the right information to do a cost analysis. The other component is looking at the location of these buildings. And typically you're going to see a multifamily property in a higher density area of the grid. And so that may require different investments in transmission, or if you're building a new community, what is the cost to get the power to that location? And if a property owner, a multifamily property owner, is putting in storage and solar, I think we need to weigh in on the reduced grid infrastructure that we can eliminate by putting these DERs in those locations, because they are higher density areas.
Okay, and Edwin, from the utilities perspective, how can the commission be able to account for these differences? I know that in the utilities filings, or rather comments to the proposed decision, the joint utilities had expressed some concern regarding the VNEM analysis. What do you think the commission should do with respect to accounting for the variation amongst the VNEM system size, but also the differences between single family home and multifamily home?
Okay, I'm gonna start saying that we are looking on the success of SOMA and the barriers that the SOMA program as a whole has to be able to implement those projects. I believe that we have now better cost data that is gonna probably help the commission to make an informed decision about what does it take to actually bring these systems online. And that varies significantly between projects, and also whether or not there is a third-party owned system or whether or not it's a customer-owned system. So I do believe that we need to look into that data to see what we can learn about what does it take to actually make these projects more economically feasible. But there is a difference between these systems operating. The system operating day to day and getting some benefits from the system versus what does it take for them to come online. I believe that different incentive structures, maybe in programs like SOMA, can probably bring up the missing link on making these programs more financeable. But we need to separate, in my opinion, we need to separate what the incentive mechanism is to bring those systems online versus what the day-to-day operation and compensation for the power that is being given is as part of the program.
Okay. Thank you. I want to change course here, and because I want to make sure that I get to my other questions. I want to talk about netting. There were a lot of questions about netting with respect to the first presentations. So in the opening comments to the November proposed decision, the utilities had argued that the commission should provide a higher avoided cost calculator or ACC plus adder to the residential VNEM customers instead of using netting. And then Ivy argued that netting in a multifamily VNEM arrangement should happen at the parcel level. And specifically at the parcel level where the service delivery point interconnects with the grid. And my understanding is that does not happen today. So I want to first turn to Ivy and ask to explain why this change is needed. And then I want to turn back to the utilities to talk more about why netting should be replaced with the higher avoided cost calculator adder. So first, Ivy.
Yeah. So the netting complication here is really driven from a legacy way of monitoring power, which is at the customer level. And when you look at the grid, a multifamily property or parcel, I think we could talk more about those definitions. The relationship with that building is really the grid planning customer, the collective usage of all of those customers, the way that Kirchhoff's law works and the physics. That was found on the record that VNEM systems do serve on-site load. So really this is a accounting and kind of legacy methodology issue where we're taking old legacy principles and trying to solve something for a modern grid with distributed energy resources. So the natural answer seems to be to keep track of the actual in and out flow of electrons at a building or a property that has a relationship with the grid. Does that answer the question? I want to make it, that's really all, that's our answer. I just want to make sure that addresses what you're looking for.
Okay. And I think that the first part of this presentation helped a lot, helped me better understand how the system works and how the tariff works. Edwin, I want to go ahead and get your response to that. And then also, if you could talk more about the utilities proposal.
Yeah, I cannot say that I disagree with what Trevor just said. Unfortunately, the VNEM tariffs have been expanded for qualification via geographic type of allocation at customers that are on parcels that are contiguous to each other, that ultimately have rendered that concept that is a local generation to a different level. So we see larger systems being connected to the north side of the street on circuit A, and most of the tenants are on the other side of the street that is on circuit B. So we argue for some consideration for that eligibility. There was, again, I mentioned earlier that there was a ruling on the way that the current definition of property lies under the VNEM, which actually expand the eligibility so long as the properties are in a contiguous state. So yes, you know, if we were to limit VNEM to be only at a point of common coupling, we can discuss on how would be the proper netting. But until that definition is fixed or that qualification is fixed, I think the concept of local netting is not going to solve that problem.
Okay, and can you talk more about the utilities proposal to eliminate netting and replace it with a higher ACC plus adder?
Okay, so going with that same train of thought, the way we see it, as I mentioned at the beginning of my presentation, is that all of the output of the generation is then considered export, and it's not flowing directly into the tenants or the beneficiaries. So is going into the system, and it travels the distribution system. Like it or not, the system it's now need to be upgraded to allow this customer generator to produce power that otherwise would look like a market system. So therefore, the sense is that the value of the electricity is not as local as we would like it to be, and it's more of a wholesale system, which again is valued at a lower price than the ACC. So that's the economics in the wholesale value. Again, notwithstanding those little systems that are very localized. Most of the NEM systems that we see right now is 200 or 300 or 400 kW, which are really impacting the grid and flow in different directions as we see it.
Okay, and Dover or Ivy, did you have a response?
Yeah, I'd like to just point out a couple things there, Edwin. So, and I appreciate this dialogue again. I want to just point out though that your comment on the power and its value is coming from a legacy accounting principle that has been proven on the record to be different than how that accounting methodology is on paper. So I just want to point that out, and that we shouldn't use a old definition or accounting principle to define the modern grid and the compensation structures that we use to promote how we're going the decarbonization opportunities that we have in front of us. So I just want, that's my main response there, is that we need to be careful to get stuck in the past, and we need to make sure that we're addressing the facts of the modern grid and how we're going to get distributed energy resources into the areas that we need them.
Okay, and
Add on.
please go ahead.
Yeah, if you don't mind. One reason, again, when we look at the physical electrons and their flow and how they are serving a system or how they're flowing in a feeder or in a circuit, we do think that there is an opportunity to, modernize the VNEM tariff to reflect the actual realities on the grid. And so we think that the property netting is the way in which we can do that, as well as streamlining operations for both the developers, customers, and the utilities. There's easier points of measurement, and it doesn't have to be this complicated. But I think we really want to move to accounting mechanisms that are based on the physical realities of the grid, not just based on, some artificial payback period or prices that are not reflective of what's happening on the grid physically. So that's why we are advocating for a property netting proposal versus some artificial adder to the avoided cost calculator.
Okay, that's actually a very good segue. My next question was, how can a successor tariff be revised to make sure we meet all the requirements of the statute, also allow California to meet its climate objectives? Yeah, I'll leave it at that. So let's talk more about this proposal, and then I want to bring in both the utility perspective and the ratepayer perspective. So we'll start with the industry.
Yeah, so we have some ideas that I believe we'll be able to provide more technical context to these ideas. But at a high level, we believe that the VNEM tariff can be modernized to account for imports and exports based off the actual electron flow of the community. And that because most of these ratepayers are on similar time of use schedules or on similar schedules outside of the care or non-care schedules, that a standardized compensation tariff can be created where the allocation of those resolved financial benefits can then be allocated versus trying to, I hate to use this word, but hack job the net metering infrastructure to work for a different type of building. And so we believe that that will simplify the operations at the utility level as well as the accounting at the property level in how those credits are distributed or used between the owner of the asset and the end participant that would like to benefit from clean energy. And this also provides a lot of opportunity for the incorporation of storage to optimize how that PV is working with the grid, how we are limiting the export of that PV system with storage, how incentive schedules or programs are deployed between these stakeholders on how they can use energy in a way that maximizes the value of that distributed energy resource, or how different controlled loads or centralized loads within these properties can be optimized to increase more value for the local stakeholders that are participating in investing in or paying for the benefits of these clean energy resources. And this is different than single family homes because there are a lot more stakeholders to engage with the system. There's a lot more load that can be leveraged. And so there's a whole different set of opportunities involved in creating a framework for this market that then can use the framework to help the grid and help us meet our environmental as well as social equity goals that we have here in the state of California.
Okay, and then a response from the utilities.
Yeah, this is Edwin again. I totally agree that this needs to be, the VNEM tariff needs to be modernized a little bit. But if we look at the presentations today, we can see that during the day, we haven't discussed that the customer has any incentive to modify behavior. So we're looking pretty much on how do we maximize the value of the system, but at the same time make the benefiting accounts or the benefiting customers more accountable for that behavior. And under the new MBT, we see very good direction on how we're going to affect behavior from those systems, because they have the time of use rates, they have the storage incentive, and they have very clear direction on how to maximize the value. The problem with SOMA, for example, is just gives a flat discount to the customers without really asking them to modify behavior. We might be able to find a common ground on how to affect that behavior. But it's really about value and making this as transparent as possible. So for us, let's simplify how this value is calculated and how we pass it on to the benefiting accounts in a way that promotes good behavior, good electrification behavior. So that's kind of my comment for that question.
Okay, let me go back to ratepayer advocates representative and get their perspective on ensuring a successful tariff can meet all of these requirements. Justin?
Yeah. Just going back to my first comments, I think we should explore what other alternatives are being pursued right now, both within and outside of the commission. And again, I'd like to highlight the Green Access Program for seeding, and one other program that we thought was a good model for future emulation was the self-generation incentive program that was funded outside of rates through the general fund. And we see that as more of a sustainable model for the state to fund large and significant investments into key priority areas. But to the extent that VNEM or similar tariffs are maintained, I think we should be aligning them as closely as possible with the net billing tariff. As we heard today, there's a lot of complexity, and it's hard for consumers to understand the different permutations of these tariffs. So I think the more that we can align behind the net billing tariff model, the better off we'll be in administering these programs, as well as for consumers to understand their different options.
Well, and that's a perfect segue to my next question, which is how can the adopted net billing tariff be modified, revised, tweaked to accommodate a successor to VNEM? And I'll go to Ivy.
Maybe I can Bab and Dover can follow up. We disagree that the VNEM tariff should be modeled exactly after the net billing tariff. Again, there are significant differences between multifamily buildings and multifamily compared to single family homes. And as Dover mentioned, there's a tremendous opportunity to decarbonize buildings, promote electrification, increase demand management at these facilities. And so we think because they are so different from single family homes that they shouldn't be aligned with the net billing tariff, and VNEM should be modernized to incorporate these different elements, and we should treat it as its own customer class with its own tariff that recognizes the differences, as well as, again, these building decarbonization opportunities. And as we build, a lot more new multifamily communities here in California with our housing goals, we're going to be integrating electrification measures. We're really going to be trying to integrate EV charging. And we do think there's a tremendous opportunity to engage customers that live within multifamily buildings for more behavioral demand response. And so a more sophisticated tariff that's based more on the opportunities at the parcel level or the property level with engaging the individual tenants, we think that it's prudent for the commission to look beyond net billing for multifamily buildings and look at a more like shared DER tariff and some of these other opportunities, again, for engaging tenants and integrating other electrification measures. So we don't think that the net billing tariff should be applicable to multifamily buildings, and you should instead look at modernizing this tariff based on the unique value and opportunities that multifamily buildings present.
Okay, and let me turn to the industry perspective. Edwin?
Yes, we certainly disagree. I think we did a lot of good work in MBT to align, to calculate some values, and to come up with a way to value the system. I mean, we could argue about how to calculate the value, but we do think that the MBT provides a good framework for which to work with some slight differences, specifically the glide path. We believe that maybe that can be improved a little different. We're going to prepare comments when we submit that, some ideas on how to do that, but we do believe that the MBT provided a working structure that we can use to modernize this tariff.
Okay. Yes, go ahead, Dover.
Thank you. I think this question was really hard to answer because it's hard to imagine an equitable outcome here where the net billing tariff that was designed, and Edwin, to your point, data from single family homes is being used to influence a completely different customer segment. And so I'll just repeat what Ali mentioned, that we don't believe that the net billing tariff works in a multi-customer situation where we're virtually trying to account for something that isn't actually aligning with the reality of the electrons at the aggregate load of a property or a parcel. So I just want to reemphasize how important it is for us to look at the realities of this customer segment and really remove the data from the net metering program in our thought process here moving forward.
Okay. I want to ask one other question, and this is kind of, you've all touched upon it, growing DERs. Another one would be storage. So how could the commission best enable storage within both the current and or a successor tariff, be it the NBT or something else? So I'll begin with Justin.
Yeah, just piggybacking off of the last round of comments from Edwin, we think the net billing tariff provides a pretty strong foundation to work from. We think the compensating exports that the avoided cost calculator provides a natural market incentive to promote storage. And there's other options as well in the community solar example, Title 24, which is one of the main drivers of multifamily solar growth, provided an option for community tiered storage projects and tiered storage and solar projects as well. And so, yeah, I don't think it needs to be all considered within the context of VNEM. There are other options out there to consider.
Okay, and from Ivy.
Yeah, I just want to quickly respond, and I don't think there is any option for multifamily buildings to include storage outside of an inline VNEM system right now. So I want to just respond to that, unless we're talking about community solar and the storage system being part of those bill credits, maybe. But I think that incorporating storage is extremely important from where we go, here on. And I can speak from the industry that the multifamily market is very excited to adopt storage. And I think the simplest way to do so is to reduce the amount of exports from these VNEM or whatever the successor is, add storage to those systems in line with the generation so that we can minimize the export to the grid and keep as much of the generated power on the property, and then optimize the loads through different electrification, control, and behavior based programs that can be operated within that property. And I think that just by modernizing the tariff in a way that accounts for the power, the imports and the exports correctly, and coming up with a tariff with the experts that are going to be involved in this process on all sides will drive the value proposition of storage to be incorporated. And it actually should be very simple to do.
Okay, and then
Nope.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, Judge Hines. Thank you. One other thing we'll note about the VNEM tariff is that right now there's a requirement that the generation is installed on a meter with no load. But if you're looking at enabling backup power and again, optimizing some of the storage benefits to promote more on-site consumption instead of exports, being able to install storage on a meter with load can provide different backup power options, which is really important for resiliency and again, these communities during blackouts. And there are other configurations that could enable backup power that might provide backup to individual tenant units if that was something that we wanted to explore further. But one of the key things that we think is important to look at is the requirements that generate the storage not be on a meter with load. We think that could be changed to incorporate a number of different configurations for storage.
Okay, thank you. And from the utilities perspective, Edwin?
Yes, we actually have filed suggested changes on how what type of configurations can be used for storage to be able to provide backup services. I just want to make sure that we distinguish the two services. VNEM is a tariff that is expected to be operating during normal market conditions. And the way I see it, we do have the ability to add storage to those VNEM systems, and they can use that storage to maximize the value of the production, of course, at different hours and things like that. So we do believe that the current VNEM tariff allows for some of that. It may not allow for full, on-site microgrid operations, which we are working with the Route 21 team to address those issues. But we do believe that the current VNEM allows that. So we want to, again, as I said before, we want to propose that the same concept of ACC and ACC Plus will be very kind of mirror the same structure to promote storage, along with the time of use rates and other incentives. So again, I want to differentiate the VNEM tariff is different than the incentives or the microgrid proceedings that we have, and they do have some requirements about on-site microgrid operation and things like that. And but for the purpose of maximizing the value, storage is allowed, and we actually support it very much.
Okay, thank you. At this time, I want to go ahead. Parties have been, or other participants have been feeding questions. So I want to go ahead and go to those questions for our panelists. First up, this is for the utilities. This question is from Sam White for 350 Bay Area. You mentioned that VNEM output onto a different feeder than the benefiting accounts would require grid upgrades to deliver the energy to the VNEM customer. But doesn't the energy actually serve the nearest load on the same feeder, effectively reducing the upstream delivery required of the utility?
Yeah. Well, the energy goes like I mentioned before to where the energy needs to go. But if there is no load on the other feeder, on the feeder that the generation is connected, then we need to change transformations. We need to change equipment, and there might be upgrades needed on the other side. Technically, that is on a case-by-case basis. But we cannot assume that the energy that is put on a system on a certain circuit automatically eliminates all of the needs of that specific circuit. We have to plan the circuit based on the load that we expect to be on that circuit, and if the additional generation that circuit creates upgrades, then we have to do it. So the point is that not all of the configurations that we have seen matches the original configuration, the on-site delivery. So some projects do, some projects don't.
And would that be true of all three utilities?
Yeah, I believe so. Yes.
Okay.
I do not have the breakdown on how many of the VNEM systems share the same feeder or which ones do not share, but I do believe that that's the same potential configuration that could occur.
Okay. And then I have a question also from Sam White for the IV team. Could you please expand on the challenges of an apples to apples comparison between mixed use multi-tenant properties versus single family homeowners? And I'm sorry, I misspoke. This is from John Witchell from King Energy.
Yeah, I can take that. Thanks for the question, John. So if I understand the question correctly, the challenge is the challenge is it's not an apples to apples comparison because they're completely different load sizes. If you look at the entirety of a multifamily property or mixed use property, the load profile is going to look a lot different than a home. For instance, at a home, if somebody leaves during the day, there's basically not a lot of load. If a couple people leave an apartment building, you may have a lot of people that are still there. So the load profile and the requirements to meet that load and the demand associated are going to be very different. So that's where I think we use the apples to apples analogy as a we don't think that we should treat this as apples to apples when making a decision for a different customer segment.
Okay. And then I want to go back to some prior questions. And this one is storage related, and it's to all of you. So Andrew Dawson from California Housing Partnership Corporation. Well, it's actually not a question. Let me go to the next one. He was wondering about integrating energy storage with VNEM, and you all spoke to that. So the next question from Ariel Strauss from Small Business Utility Advocates. Under the current VNEM, can a battery be charged from the grid, or is that prohibited, as is the case under conventional NEM?
It's our understanding that it cannot, but I'll let Edwin speak to that.
Edwin, can you answer that for us?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm having technical difficulties right now, so in and out. Would you mind repeating the question? I apologize about that.
Under current VNEM, may a battery be charged from the grid, or is that prohibited, as is the case under conventional NEM?
Yeah, currently it's prohibited, and this is just to satisfy NEM requirements, of course.
Okay. And then I have another unrelated question. This is from Ben Schwartz from Clean Coalition. Can a VNEM system be deployed on contiguous or adjacent properties? And I believe we've already talked about that, Ali. That is the case, correct?
I can speak to it.
Yes, of course.
Go ahead, Ali. Sorry.
Oh, I was just going to say the definition of property in the VNEM tariff includes any contiguous or adjacent property, so long as all of the property is owned by the same customer. So there can be like divisions, but as long as the property is all owned by one customer, I think that VNEM systems are allowed on contiguous property.
Okay, thank you. And I'm just trying to find, I'm sorry, it's hard to scroll through all of these questions. I'm trying to find, there were some netting questions that I wanted to make sure that we addressed. And I believe that they have all been answered. Okay. All right, well then, I've just been told there are no additional questions, and that is perfect timing. We are pretty much at 3 o'clock. I want to thank you all for participating today, for giving us your time, both in preparation and as well as today. At this point, it is time, yes, for a break. So we're gonna take a 15-minute stretch break, come back at 3:15, and we're gonna do the same thing again, except for NEMA. So if we could get the break slide up, please. And we will be back at 3:15. Thank you all. Okay, everyone, it's 3:15. I will wait for a moment while everyone slowly comes back. And I will ask our staff to bring up to promote the panelist for the first afternoon, or for the 3:15 presentations.
Hi, Judge. I think all of our presenters are panelists now.
Okay, great. So we're going to turn our attention now to net energy metering aggregation, or NEMA. And we're going to have an overview of the mechanics of the current sub-tariff. And we're first going to have a presentation from the utility perspective. So our speaker for the utilities is Justin Starks. And Justin, are you with us?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Can you hear me all right? Okay, perfect.
Yeah, if you could just give us a little bit about your background and then go ahead and proceed through your presentation.
Absolutely. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Justin Starks, and I'm a manager here in PG&E, overseeing the implementation of the net billing tariffs. I have the pleasure of giving a brief overview from a high-level perspective of the utility for the NEMA program, but I'll call out before I jump in that 10 minutes does not do it justice. And you'll see very clearly as we get to the billing example that it requires more discussion. And so for that reason, I might pass through the slides fairly quickly so that we can spend that adequate time there, but look forward to responding to any additional follow-up questions during the panel sector. Next slide. So just to reorient us, we've just talked about NEM2V, that's how it's designated in our tariffs in PG&E's territory. And thought just it'd be good to connect how the NEM2V differs from the NEM2A. So let's orient ourselves on the far right-hand side of the screen. There you'll see from an eligibility perspective that for NEM2V, the buildings, the facilities, and the structures must be under the control of a single owner or operator, but the benefiting accounts can remain under the tenant's name, which makes a lot of sense because tenants come in and out of the benefited accounts, and so there's not a reason for the name to remain the same. Moving down, all the benefiting and generator accounts must be on the eligible property. I believe that was called out right towards the end, such that the property can have it across a single multi-tenant or multi-meter facilities on contiguous parcels of land. So as long as there's that one operator, it can cross the street, and as long as that's considered to fit the eligible criteria of property. From a net surplus compensation, it's eligible. And we talked very briefly that from a load perspective, the generator account is not eligible to have load there. And from the credit allocation, that is designed by the operator and submitted to the utilities. And from that, that's how the credits flow to the benefiting accounts. And then finally, if a tenant moves in or out, or added or removed, it does not require a true up. Moving over to NEM2, the middle portion following the same flow. So NEM-A differs from NEM2V in the sense that the properties must be solely owned, leased, or rented by that eligible customer generator, which means that all the accounts, the generator, and the benefiting must be the one customer of record. The benefiting accounts can be on multiple parcels as long as they are contiguous and adjacent. From a net surplus compensation standpoint, they're not eligible, but from a generator account perspective, they are eligible to have load. And you'll see that quickly in the slide that I'll show from the diagram perspective, that meter could perhaps serve the load of the house, as well as be sized to help with the estimated load of the remaining benefited accounts. A bulk of my conversation will be spent on this credit allocation known as dynamic allocation of the KWH credits. And then lastly, with the NEMA arrangement, there's the possibility of adding or removing benefiting accounts, but in so doing, it will trigger what is known as a true up. And as we get into the billing, you'll understand why that's the case. Next slide, please. So there's a lot here. I'm just going to touch on a few points. The first one is that second bullet point there from the SB 594 that brought forth the expansion of load aggregation into the NEM tariffs with the stipulation that there not be a cost shift to non-participant and that the commission would need to make that determination by the September 30th timeline. Moving down to the third bullet point, in September 19, 2013, the commission through resolution E4610 assessed that it wouldn't cause a shift to cost shift to the non-NEM participants, but it was due primarily to the existence of the then NEM cap. And so the thinking there was that whether it was a residential customer or non-residential customer, NEMA or NEM, since there was a cap, there wouldn't be any incremental cost shift. Moving down to the latter part, I would just call out that last bullet point there from the more recent decision of the MBT, is that from a finding of facts, it was called out that VNEM spoken of generally speaking of NEMA and VNEM, provides benefits to the grid similar to that of the NEM2 tariffs, and that the NEM2 tariffs negatively impact non-participant ratepayers. Next slide, please. So this is just the beef diagram of an arrangement that could occur under NEM aggregation. And just to orient you, the top of the slide has to do with the definition, somewhat edited for readability about how or what is eligible. So the benefiting accounts, i.e. in the picture, the ones that have the pump 1, pump 3, pump 2 on there, are eligible as long as they're located on a property that is adjacent or contiguous to the property on which the generator account is located. And in this diagram, that would be the green square, where you will see that there's a meter there, there's a picture of the solar panel, and it's also connected to the barn, which has load. So in this case, this NEMA arrangement has load at the generator account, but is sized in order to be able to allocate credits to the other benefiting accounts that are on the beige tiles. And so long as those properties are solely owned, leased, or rented by the eligible customer generator. One other thing I'd call out is that from a rate class perspective, although we're showing images here of agricultural pumps, it really could be a mix. So even that barn there might be under residential rate, or I'll say in an arrangement, it could be that the house is tied to the meter where the solar generating facility is. A benefiting account might be an agricultural pump or another meter that is perhaps on a commercial or industrial rate. And then one other thing I would call out about this picture is that you'll notice that even with the benefiting accounts, they are able to cross a public road or thoroughfare. That's what you're seeing with the example of pump number 5, because it's continuous, same owner. And then for pump number 6, it's the same owner, it's contiguous, but there is this aspect that even that meter could be on a different feeder. And then lastly, if you would divert your attention back to the far right, you'll see on the red tile there that that pump would not be eligible because, for example, it could be a different owner even though it's adjacent. Next slide, please. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time to talk about dynamic allocation, and I just warn you now that it's going to be a little bit of a math exercise, but I think that's the way. I think it's very important to understand the complexity here, because the parties may have raised this idea that adopting something similar here into the VNEM tariff would be beneficial. Before we move down that, it's important for us to be grounded in what is happening. So again, a call out that unlike with the virtual net energy metering, where the generation is applied to the benefiting accounts each month based on a predefined allocation, net energy metering aggregation, or NEMA, uses dynamic allocation. And dynamic allocation is a flashy way of saying that month over month, whichever meter it is that has the most usage gets the most credit. So that means that every single month, we have to recalculate and reassess where the cumulative usage is in that entire NEMA arrangement. And then those credits in bullet point 3 are then used to reduce the billed usage for that particular month. So at a high level, the benefit of this particular billing arrangement is that at the end of 12 months within that relevant period, the generation is allocated to the meter that has the most usage. So that ensures the maximum utilization of the credits. The drawback of it is that the billing methodology is complex and it's difficult sometimes for customers to really understand what's happening month over month and why. And we'll see that in this next example. Next slide. So there's a lot here. So I'm going to try to ground you. The key words that I'd like you to keep in mind is monthly usage, cumulative usage, monthly generation, and cumulative generation. To orient you on the slide on the far left, we have it broken out by month 1 and month 2. So I'll spend the first part of the time walking through what's happening on a month 1 basis, and then see what happens when we move to month 2. At the top of this table, you'll see a designation of benefiting account number 1. And the example here could be as with the diagram, where there's a solar system that's on the house. So that means that that generator account also has load. And then benefiting account number 2 will just be something like an agricultural pump. So walking from the top down, you see that I have the title as monthly KWH, cumulative allocation for both the benefiting account number 1 and number 2. So let's walk through it as best we can. So for the first one in the column notated as benefiting account number 1, you have in the first month, so we're at the very beginning, you have 400 kWh. And if you look at a benefiting account number 2, you'll see that there's 300 kWh. So there's a total of 700 kWh in this arrangement in this month. So with that as our denominator, the 700, we have to understand where the usage is. And so what you'll see in the column underneath benefiting account number 1 is you have the 400 as the numerator for this particular meter with the 700 total of the arrangement, which produces a 57% ratio. So with that, we now move down to the next row, which is talking about the generation. So from the generation perspective, in that given month, there is 500 kWh worth of credits that is available. So with that as the background, we use the 57% green from the top to multiply by the 500 that's available, and that yields the negative 285. So for the benefiting account number 1, their monthly usage was 400, but they got allocated the 285. So for that month and that benefiting account, they were billed for 115 as opposed to 400. I'll try that again really quickly. That 285 came from the available 500 generation credit, and that was applied to that meter to offset how much that meter would be owed. And the same similar allocation method happens for benefiting account number 2. Very briefly, they had the 300. We're applying now the 43% to the overall 500 that's available. That yields the negative 215. So that customer who had a monthly usage of 300 is only billed for 85 kW, the 300 minus the 215. Wonderful, right? Sounds pretty straightforward. Now, when you move to month number 2, this is where things get a little tricky because again, we're talking about cumulative monthly usage. So we always have to look back to the previous months to determine whether credits have been allocated to a meters appropriately. And so again, what you'll see in that column on the right, just to the right of month 2, is you have the monthly usage of 650. That's for the entirety of that month in that arrangement. So you have the 50 from the benefiting account number 1, and you have the 600 from the benefiting account number 2. So that gives you the monthly usage of the 650, and then the cumulative monthly usage. So both this month, month number 2, and the previous month of the 700, you have the 650 and the 700, which brings you to the 1350. So that is now our new denominator for both benefiting account number 1 and number 2. And now we have to look at, again, the cumulative monthly amount. So although there was only 500 in that month for benefiting account number 1, you're actually adding the 50 from this month and the 400 from month number 1 to give you the 450. So now you do the 450 divided by the total cumulative usage of the 1350, and that's how you get the 33% for now this month. Then you have to move down to the next section where you're looking at the generation. And again, we're looking at both the monthly and the cumulative. So now cumulatively speaking, how much generation is there available? This month we produced 300. Last month was the 500. So now you have a cumulative banked amount of credits that is 800 kW. You apply that to the 33%, and that gives you the negative 264. So that means for this meter at this point in time in the 12-month billing arrangement, the most this meter should get is 264. You might notice that just to the left of that, there's a positive number there instead of a negative. Why did that happen? That's because in month number 1, this meter was given 285. But now as we move into month number 2, they're no longer eligible to have that max 285. At most, they're allowed to have 264. So for this particular month, now we have to take some of that credit away from this benefiting account and give it to the meter that had more credits. So the result is that this customer is billed for 71 kWh, which is the 50 that they had from their monthly usage, as well as the 21 that resulted from us taking the credits from this account to apply to another meter that had more usage. So that's what happened in benefiting 1, and I think that draws the point specifically for what happens with benefiting number 2. The same idea. We look at the cumulative monthly usage. We also look at the cumulative amount at that meter and assess what is the max credits that should be applied to that specific benefiting account and allocate the credits appropriately. And again, this happens month over month where we continue to look back again and again to see how much credit should be allocated so that by the end of the 12th month, the credits are optimally put to where the most usage was. But from a customer experience standpoint, as you can see, this is inherently complex. Next slide. So finally, this is just a little bit of high-level participation statistics. And I just want to call out here that you'll see that although it was intended primarily to support the agriculture community, it is not only agricultural customers who benefit from it. You have residential amounts here, so it's broken up by installation count number, install capacity, and benefiting account. Moving from left to right, you can see from the residential, there's approximately 3,600 with installed capacity of around 44 megawatts, and then a benefiting account of about 8,000 and so on and so forth, with a number of caveats that I won't bog everyone down with the notes there. And with that, I'd like to conclude my presentation. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you. And you weren't kidding when you said it was complex. I have multiple questions, but I'm going to have our next presenter present first. Meanwhile, I want to remind everyone that if you have questions, please, again, put them in the chat and staff will collate them and provide them to me. So next up, we have a representative of Agricultural Energy Consumers Association, Richard McCann. Mr. McCann.
Thank you, Your Honor. I am representing both the Agricultural Energy Consumers Association, or AECA, and the California Farm Bureau Federation, CFB. We were known as the ag parties in the proceeding. My background is I've been working for about over 30 years, most often on agricultural energy issues, testified a number of times at the PUC, and testified here in the NEM proceedings. And I'm an economist by training, worked on a range of issues that include water, energy, climate change, et cetera. So if we can just go to the next slide, I'll just quickly go over the things that I'm going to cover. We believe as the ag parties that NEMA works as it is today, and there are important reasons why it works because it's really different from the other NEM tariffs. It is beneficial to agricultural customers and it's beneficial to California. And I'm going to talk a bit about what the impacts of NEMA are on the rates overall and on the distribution system. And just finally, to emphasize that any new sub-tariff will need to comply with the law. Next slide, please. So the tariff, Justin went through a very complex calculation, thank you. I went through it with a client as well. It's interesting in that I've been working for these clients for quite a while, and I've never actually seen this calculation until very recently. It wasn't really run by the agricultural parties that I'm aware of. So it is unnecessarily, or it is complex. I don't know if it's unnecessarily so, but that's probably an issue that we will want to revisit. But most importantly, NEMA was established so that agricultural customers can aggregate their loads across parcels and roads and across multiple meters. And that's to put them on equal footing with commercial and industrial customers. In most cases, those customers, C&I customers, have one meter and multiple loads behind that meter. And they are, if they put a solar panel on top of their roof, they are able to net against that single meter. Agricultural customers don't have that. Almost every load for an agricultural customer is separately metered and is a separate account. So it would be like going into Walmart and having a meter on the refrigerators, another meter on the freezers, another meter on the lighting, another meter on any kind of water pumping or heating system in the back. That's what agricultural customers, that's the kind of situation that they are in. So they needed a different tariff than what the NEM tariff is offering to commercial and industrial customers. One of the important things to understand about the NEMA customers is they pay demand charges and connection charges, customer service charges on every one of those meters. So they are paying those charges without having those benefits netted against the generation that is coming from the generation account. One of the important things is that these demand charges cover the majority of distribution costs. For the Ag C tariff, for example, in PG&E, I calculated that the demand charge covers almost 90% of the distribution costs. And for Ag B, it's a majority of the distribution costs that are recovered through demand charges. So I'll get back to the importance of that, but this is different than for other NEM customers who, for example, the residential customers who have no demand charge. They are avoiding the distribution charges that are embedded in those variable energy charges. That's not the case with NEMA customers. In addition, NEMA customers are not compensated for excess generation. And their annual true-up reflects these variations in daily, monthly, and seasonal load variations. Other customers have relatively predictable loads, so that the construct for this needs to reflect the agricultural load situation. And finally, it's really the way NEMA is now is the only means for agricultural customers to install DERs like solar. Next slide, please. So why is NEMA beneficial to agricultural customers? Well, it really allows agricultural customers to optimize how they use their land by locating the solar facilities on land that's either underperforming or actually needs to be retired or fallowed due to water use restrictions. And this is particularly important in complying with the Surface Groundwater Management Act, Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, that was enacted in 2014. And it is actually projected that up to 1 million acres of agricultural land may have to be retired to comply with SGMA. So the commission has to be cognizant of its partnership with other state agencies such as Department of Water Resources and State Water Board in managing the state's water resources. And part of this is by encouraging alternative uses of land. It also allows agricultural customers to hedge their bills against rapidly escalating utility rates. And agriculture in California is the most globally competitive industry. There is more pressure from other places in the world, and as costs rise for agriculture here, that makes them less competitive. Next slide, please. So why is NEMA beneficial to California? Well, for one thing, it induces substantial investment in renewables in locations where there's excellent solar insolation. That is, for example, in the Central Valley. And it does reduce new generation and transmission capacity installation. As I testified in the proceeding, at least 6,000 megawatts of generation has been displaced by NEM installations since 2006. And it also reduces local distribution investment in the substations and in feeders. It also is giving the opportunity for the state to find other beneficials of use of agricultural land that may be fallowed or retired to meet SIGMA requirements. And finally, it's a way of getting more renewable power out into the rural grid without having to pay renewable energy credits to wholesale generators. So finally, it shifts some of the generation investment risk from ratepayers who are bearing all of the risk associated with grid scale generation under the current rules, and it shifts it to individual customers who are at risk for those investments for their own generation. Next slide, please. So what is the impact of NEMA on rates and on the distribution system? So as I pointed out, NEMA customers are unique among NEM customers in that they pay NEM charges that cover most of their distribution costs. And they don't have the option that commercial and industrial customers have with the low demand charge solar rates like the E19R rate. They basically are they are covering those through the demand charges. The look back study did not look at agricultural customers. It did not look at commercial customers with demand charges. It had a large collection of commercial customers without any of those various distinctions. The finding of fact in the decision found that NEMA rates cover the cost of service. The resolution E4610 that Justin referenced actually didn't say a thing about the NEM cap and never referenced that in saying that the rates were cost effective, and hasn't been anything in the presented in evidence that would counter that presumption. So there needs to be substantially more analysis in order to demonstrate if there is any kind of cost shift that is covering that is coming from this particular rate. That the NEMA benefiting loads all have to be contiguous or adjacent makes it so that all of the loads are on a single feeder. And that means that they are served only by the secondary distribution system. If you look at these rates, you'll find that only 10% of the distribution costs are actually associated with secondary distribution costs. That means that when the ag customers, the NEMA customers are paying 90% of their distribution costs through distribution charges, they're more than compensating for the amount of distribution that they are using to transfer their generation to their accounts. And just as importantly, agriculture is less than 5% of state loads. It's much less than that in Edison, and it's a little bit less than that in PG&E service territory. That means that even if you have a few NEMA customers, the slice of any type of subsidy that is flowing to these customers is very small, just a tiny impact on rates for any of the other customers. Next slide, please. So in terms of revising the NEMA subtariff, we say that it really must comply with the law. That is that the customers need to have any kind of compensation mechanism has to be focused on the amount of electricity that is supplied and the amount of electricity that is generated and netted over a 12-month period, that does not allow for net billing. It only allows for net energy metering in the law. As Justin pointed out, there's already a certain amount of net billing that's going on in the NEMA calculation that is being done. And also, due to the separately metered nature of NEMA customers, separately crediting generating accounts monetarily and then transferring a credit to the other benefiting accounts starts to look a lot like a remat tariff. And this hasn't gone through a PURPA evaluation in terms of how the avoided costs are calculated for that kind of generation. So it would really undermine the fundamental principle of the NEMA tariff, which is to try to put agricultural customers on the same footing financially as commercial and industrial customers who are basically able to aggregate most of their loads behind a single meter and behind that meter that the that is being served by the generation. Next slide, please. So finally, I just want to conclude that the Commission should be sure to respect the investments made by agricultural customers in generation of this kind, so that the terms of the NEM 1 and 2 tariffs are respected and carried out to the end of at least to the end of their terms, and we could talk about whether that should continue further. And to remember that customers are not speculators in energy markets, that the contracts and pricing terms should reflect both the means of mitigating the risks for those customers and looking at the full long-term benefits that are created for other customers and citizens in California. It's really important that any NEMA customers under a revised tariff receive the full benefits of avoiding the new generation resources that are authorized to PUC and not focusing solely on short-run market prices, and to reflect the investment burdens and risks that customers are taking. And with that, I will conclude. Thank you.
Thank you. And I do believe that we have a few questions. Let me just see what staff has provided to me. I know that there were a couple questions in the chat. Here we go. This is from Ben Schwartz. And he asks, can one of the meters in a NEMA system be removed if the deployment of a separate NEM system was desired?
Is that question for me?
Yes.
So under NEMA, you're allowed to add or remove benefiting accounts if the question is that. I'm not sure if I followed, if that was what they were trying to get at.
Okay, Ben, let us know if your question was answered, or if perhaps you could provide us a little more clarification.
Yeah, I remember Justin had a slide that actually had something about that.
Okay, next up also from Ben Schwartz, NEMA only compensates the energy value. Does this mean that demand charges, delivery charges, and standby charges cannot be avoided and reduced or reduced?
Yeah, I can take that. The answer is that is correct, and that's not specific to NEMA. That's specific to all NEM tariffs. That if you had the customers responsible for the demand charges and the service charges, and that the credits are by design there to offset energy charges.
Okay. And then the next question is from Small Business Utility Advocates, Ariel Strauss. May a battery associated with a NEMA system be charged from the grid, or is that prohibited like in NEM and VNEM?
So the answer is that if that storage is to charge from the grid, it cannot be factored in as part of the credits that should be allocated. There are some nuances there related to the estimation methodology for arrangements that have solar and storage paired together, but by and large, the policy objective is that credits should be allocated that are renewably charged.
Okay. And then finally, a question from Ali at Ivy, and this is to you, Richard. Can you speak more to the netting that is required by law for NEMA? Is it currently done in the same way as VNEM? And is netting done at each meter or at the property level?
I have to be honest, I'm not as familiar with how VNEM works, so that I can't speak to a contrast between the two of them. But the netting, as my understanding, is done on an aggregated basis across all of the system that is covered by the generation and the aggregation of benefiting accounts, and then it's allocated among the benefiting accounts in the manner that Justin described.
Okay, and then we actually have one more question. This is from Rich Borba. I don't know who Rich is affiliated with. How many of commercial NEMA systems are ag processing or ag related? And Justin, I believe you had a slide up that gave the breakdown. That was more of PG&E.
Correct. Yeah, I wouldn't be able to speak to the other IOUs, but that was a bit of a snapshot in time, and that was specific to the generator accounts, because as we know, the benefiting accounts can have any number of representation of agricultural, residential, or whatnot. So what was presented in the slide was primarily those accounts that were set up as the residential, commercial, or agricultural from a generating account perspective.
Yeah, and just to give a little perspective, PG&E has about 4 times the agricultural load that Southern California Edison has. So PG&E represents the lion's share of agricultural accounts in the state.
Okay. I have one more question, but I'm going to ask Brett to go ahead and bring up our speakers for the panelists. Justin, you and Richard are on the panel as well. We also need Justin Ong representing Cal Advocates and Brad Hevner from CALSA. But Justin, I wanted to ask you the very complicated calculations that you walk through, were they a result of legislation and thereby statute, or was that something that the commission adopted in a resolution?
I would have to say that it's likely the latter. If I recall, I'm trying to dust off the cobwebs. I believe we worked very closely with the agricultural party and stakeholders to come up with a methodology that would work best for them. And then we took that as a proposal to the commission and got it approved. Brad might have some thoughts on that as well. But I think that was kind of a joint effort that we came back and said, this what looks like it'll help this community, and it was approved as such.
Okay. And Richard, did you have any history with that? Oh, you're on mute.
No, yeah, sorry. I have to find the mute button. It's always a little hard. No, I was not involved in those discussions about that methodology, but that doesn't mean that the Farm Bureau and AECA were not involved. I just don't know for sure.
Your Honor, could I give some history on the billing? This is Brad Hebner at CALSA.
Oh, yes, please. Thank you.
Yeah, so it is in statute that there is this proportional methodology. It's in the law. And unfortunately, the statute also says that the proportionate allocation shall be computed each billing period. And that requires us to do that year-to-date reallocation each month, when in reality, it's only the end of the year that really matters. At the end of the year, you look at the total usage by each meter, the percentage of the total consumption, and you allocate the generation credits according to those same percentages. But we need to do it each month, year to date, and do the reallocation as Justin explained. I fully concur with Justin's initial remarks on this, that it is both complicated but accurate and fair. It reduces stranded credits. In VNEM, you actually have some stranded credits, and with the NEMA billing, it avoids stranded credits. So it's best for customers, although it is complex. And then we worked with the utilities a lot in the early days of NEMA. When it first came out, the utilities made a decision to do only manual billing, and they thought that the volume wouldn't be that high. So they literally had people copying and pasting through spreadsheets. And then the volume got high enough that they decided to automate. And as part of that, in the initial stages, what they were sending to customers was incomprehensible. And they realized it, we realized it, the customers realized there's a lot of frustration. And we spent a lot of time with the utilities. They were very collaborative. And we were, down to the level of talking about the words used in the headings and the columns and what tables go on the bills and what don't. And we made a lot of improvement. And at this point, I'm not hearing the complaints that I heard in the early years about NEMA billing not being comprehensible. It is complex, but the IT is now up and running, and we have a basic attitude of ain't broke, don't fix it at this point.
Well,
I will say that I had a conversation with a grower this week, and he basically seemed to be very comfortable describing it, even though we were trying to do it verbally, and it was difficult for me to follow. And the way he was describing it in his account, but seeing it the way that Justin laid out on paper, I could see how this grower understood what was happening.
well, this is a great segue to my first question. And just to let all of the other workshop participants know that I did send a list of questions to our panelists. And also joining us again from Cal Advocates is Justin Ong. So my first question is, are there obstructions with the current NEMA tariff, barriers, problems with the way it works? And I'm going to start with Justin. With Justin from PG&E.
I would say, Justin, maybe I will go Justin S to help. I would say that, as we've been consistent in the entire proceeding, is that there is a cost shift that needs to be addressed. That will continue to be a problem that we saw with the more general market MBT, and it's something that should be looked at for NEMA as well. As you all saw, the billing, though optimal for customers, is complex. And so on our side, we do still experience a number of repeated callers trying to understand, and we've developed a lot of collateral to help support customer understanding. But it isn't you need a master's degree to really grasp what's going on month over month. So looking at any opportunity for us to improve that experience is always to the benefit of the customers, and then would also help to reduce operational costs from the utilities and even from, I would say, the vendors of trying to work collaboratively with their customer to understand what's really happening on a month over month basis.
Okay, and then let's turn to Richard.
There aren't the customers haven't really expressed much in the way of barriers for this, other than the interconnection issues that come up that just for NEM customers in general. And the billing complexity is problematic, but I think that, as Brad pointed out, it's kind of borne out of necessity as to what the legislature handed us. I think that trying to solve that would be quite difficult. Growers are actually quite sophisticated group in terms of how they get into their business and how they sort through things. They manage a lot of different things going on. And so eventually they get to the right answer, especially the farmers who have a large enough operation to install this kind of system. They are very sophisticated operators, and so I don't think that ultimately that this is a big problem. As to the cost shift issue, I think I will point out again, there has not been an analysis of cost shift for NEMA or for agricultural accounts in general that has been presented in the proceeding. So there's not my own calculations show that there really isn't a cost shift going on at this point, or if it is, it's pretty minimal.
Okay, well, that's a good segue to my next question. What cost, since there hasn't been, and the commission recognized that the look back study did not look at NEMA in particular, what cost and avoided cost should the commission consider for the successor to the NEMA tariff? And I'll ask that of Brad.
Well, I do think it's important to look at the cost of service analysis and not just the standard practice manual cost effectiveness tests. And, you know, they showed that agricultural and commercial customers are paying their own way under NEM 2. And if there's a NEM 3 version of NEMA, it would point even more in that direction. So I think the cost of service analysis is important to look back to, but I really think at this stage of the game, we don't need to do another big look back study that's NEMA specific and VNEM and cost effectiveness analysis and take the time to do that. To me, the solution on NEMA is pretty straightforward. If you get the on-site netting right and do some sort of glide path, I think that we can move forward. You know, let's put the info on the record and make a quick decision here. I do think we need to carefully consider what Farm Bureau brings up on the legal issue of, you know, effectively requiring true netting. So that needs to be looked at from a legal standpoint. But I think let's just find something that's practical and that is reasonably aligned with other tariffs. The other thing, if I can mention a couple of things though quickly, just on costs and avoided costs, is food security and water affordability. I mean, we're talking about, you know, farmers struggle in 1,000 ways, and energy costs are a big problem for them, and helping them stabilize energy costs is really important. And then water districts are one of the other big users of NEMA, and energy is the single biggest cost of a county water provider. And so that filters through to the bills that we pay, the water bills that we pay. That's a real cost. And so allowing them to generate their own power is really important for water districts.
Okay, thank you. Actually, that this is not on my list of questions, but again, going back to that slide, Justin, that you provided, Justin S., that you provided that broke down who the recipients of this tariff or who the enrollees of this tariff are. And the ag portion was, I believe, only about a quarter of all of and I could be misremembering it, but it was less than half of all of the recipients of the tariff. Can you talk a little bit more about who those recipients are and how that impacts how the commission should look at changes to this tariff?
Sure thing. And I wonder if Brett or someone could go back to that slide. I can see it easily here, but I think it might be good to look at it. So just at a high level, this again is the installation count for the generator account, because in an arrangement, it can be a mix of many different benefiting accounts. It could have some residential, it could have some agricultural, and so on. And so looking strictly at the generator account, what we are saying here is that of the residential sector, there's about 3,600 whose generator account is connected to a residential rate. And then subsequently, because of that, and from an agricultural perspective, there's about 1,500 or 1,600 that is to an agricultural rate. But in terms of what other mix may be inside there, it could be a combination of any of those. And so connected to that is really what you see to the far end is the benefiting account meter number. So behind any residential generator account, there's approximately this amount of benefiting account. So that's how this diagram should be read.
Okay. Okay, that's extremely helpful.
And would you like me to characterize some of these commercial and residential arrangements? I felt like
that would be helpful. Yes.
Yeah. So, and you know, farms, first off, necessarily, every water irrigation pump is on a different meter. If farms are going to have solar, you have to do meter aggregation. So that's pretty obvious. For commercial industrial, some of these, as Rich Borba pointed out, are ag processing plants with commercial meters. But a lot of them are both water districts and schools. If you picture a school campus that has a high school, right next door is a middle school, there's a stadium, there's a barn or a shop, all of those have different meters, but it's all the school district. It's all effectively one contiguous property. And because there are multiple meters and you want to put the solar all off in that corner next to the stadium, you have to do meter aggregation. That makes sense, and it works in that context. And then on residential, we see a lot that is a house and a barn, you know, a rural house with a barn's on a different meter. It's really one property, yeah, but they have 2 meters. Or sometimes even small residential, the garage has an EV charger that's on a different meter, and you aggregate those together. It's 2 meters on one property. So those are some examples. And again, I think we shouldn't overthink this. Some properties have multiple meters. Some properties have single meters. It's not that different.
Okay. So Brad, I want to go back to what you had said about not needing to go back and do full studies that take where we are and make, and I'm paraphrasing you, make tweaks. Tweaks. What do you envision those tweaks would be? And then I'll ask that of the other panelists as well.
Well, I think there are 2 options. One option is to use the net billing tariff. So you've got the established export rates for exports, but you have on-site netting. So in the electricity that's used in the same billing interval, you have credits as kilowatt hours. And the electricity that's exported, your credits are in dollars according to the export rates. It's basically what was in the November PD. That had it right. The important thing is to maintain the 15-minute billing intervals, and then the usage within that billing interval is credited across the accounts in kilowatt hours. And then when it's not used within the billing interval, it's credited as export rates. And I think that's a very straightforward way to make it the net billing tariff for multiple meters. We would like to have a glide path, just as we recommended for commercial. So that, you know, our recommendation will be consistent there. So that's one option. It's very aligned with the net billing tariff. And another option, I think, is more in line with what the Farm Bureau is thinking about, is more net metering based. And I would let them explain what that might be.
Okay, then we'll move on to Richard.
You know, I'm not sure that there is any particular tweaks that we can propose that outside of the way that it's currently being done. One of the important things to understand that's different about agriculture versus commercial is that agriculture has big seasonal swings and loads. So the credits that they earn in April and May and October and November from generation, because their benefiting accounts are not being used, are what would then be transferred. Those are the credits that need to be transferred to June, July, and August and September during the high irrigation seasons. So monthly, doing this on a monthly basis, along with the fact that months are an entirely arbitrary time unit that is just created out of the air by human beings, doesn't really help with solving this problem. It's that the credits need to reflect the physical world, the cycles of the physical world, which is days, seasons, and years. And months are not part of the physical world. So the seasonal cycle, or the cycle that's in the law, is annual right now, that the credits need to be carried over on an annual basis. And so that is the way that the system really needs to be set up, and the way it is set up right now. So we don't see any big tweaks in this. That we're already, these customers are not being credited for any excess exports. So there isn't any kind of subsidy that's going on in that way. So it's, I think it's important to understand that this is for agricultural customers. If there's any significant changes in this in this particular rate, the agricultural installations will end. There won't be any more because that storage is not cost effective for the types of agricultural loads, the way they operate, because of the long irrigation sets that occur. 10 to 21 hour irrigation sets. You can't use storage to cover all of that. So this is, it's just important to understand that this is probably the way it's constructed now is the way that it will probably have to work for agriculture if we want to have solar installed on the lands that are going to be retired due to the surface or the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act.
I keep going back to that slide, and I'm sorry because your arguments are generated or generally focused on agricultural, but yet it seems to me that it's not just agriculture in the sense of farming. They are not the only recipients of this tariff.
Excuse me, sorry for interrupting, but I say then the solution might be bifurcating the tariff. If that's the issue, then you can bifurcate the tariff.
I'm going to go ahead and go to Justin S. And I'm sorry, Justin Ong, I will get you in just a moment. Justin, if you could give your response.
So I would say consistent with the IOU proposal, we think that we should, there's no concern about the relevant period, the 12 months. I definitely understand where you're coming from, Richard, in the sense of what's a month, what's this, what's that, but it is the way that customers operate and even when you get your paycheck on a monthly basis. So there is some understanding and it's consistent with our billing methodology from the utility perspective. So a month makes sense. And all within ensuring that the crediting happens over the 12-month. There's no concern about that. And even I would say from the netting that's currently happening today, which is different from I think what the PD was describing. But the idea is that we would have this credit that could be allocated to the accounts as to these benefiting accounts, whatever it was, and not have some kind of strange additional complex netting beyond what's already happening now. I think we definitely want to stay away from that. But we should also take a look again at the value of the credits, that there should be, if NEMA is to continue, we should be appropriately evaluating those credits at the amount that they're worth to the grid. Understanding that they're helping to support an arrangement that makes sense and that there could be some kind of continuation of NEMA. It's really the question of what is the credits, what is that value of the credits? And we believe that the finding in the net billing tariff decision is pretty clear that we have to move away from retail. So from that perspective, I think that would be the tweak that makes sense. The other thought that I have is that, and this kind of goes back to the VNEM conversation, storage is going to play a vital role in the future of California. And so already within the NEMA tariff, there are opportunities for storage to be incorporated. And we think that should continue as well. There's no reason to say that it wouldn't play a role. So if there's opportunity there, maybe from, if we're talking about installation costs, maybe through incentive programs that's outside of the tariff. But the fact that storage can be incorporated in NEMA, we see that as a very viable future.
And Justin Ong, would you like to respond as well?
Yeah, there's been a lot of good discussion so far, and I'd just like to highlight a few points made by different speakers that are consistent with our thinking. The other Justin mentioned just a general concern about the cost shift created by NEMA, even though it's a lot smaller than residential net metering. We're still concerned over the long run as solar becomes a much larger share of our grid. And so I think it's important to be cognizant of these issues early on in the process and looking ahead at the curve. I think to Brad's point, if NEMA does exist, I think it does make sense to align with other tariffs. And last, just going back to my comments around VNEM, community solar and the green access program may actually be even more relevant in the agricultural context, just because of the amount of space and potential there. So,
Well, I have to say on community solar right now, NEMA doesn't allow for sales of power to a parcel that's not owned by another customer. So that community solar is not an option.
yeah, and I think the details are under consideration in the other proceeding that's going on.
Well, I mean, this is under state law. You would have to go to the legislature to make a change that allows for community solar under NEMA. It's not
Right.
something the PUC can decide.
Right. I think this would be separate from NEMA.
So, that's community, whether the issue about community solar and agriculture, this is actually an issue in SIGMA, in the groundwater sustainability area administrative units, the GSAs, that trying to find parcels that farmers are willing to allow for groundwater percolation of floodwaters is actually a big issue, and it's a problem of getting compensation for that, because land isn't just sitting out there idly. It's all being used in most of these agricultural areas for cultivation. And so a farmer who turns it over for some other purpose has an opportunity cost, a very significant opportunity cost that they have to forego in order to put in these other measures. So you have to decide on how you're going to compensate those farmers for the land that they gave up in order to install solar panels. With NEMA and being able to do it within their own accounts, they are able to make their own decision with the financial data that they have individually, and they can decide whether it benefits them to install these solar panels to serve their individual loads. You don't have to have a bigger community-wide discussion about, well, Farmer Jones over there, he's the one who should give up that 400 acres in order to build a solar panel to serve all the rest of us. And you don't have to go through all the negotiations in order to create that kind of community solar project. This is a much more difficult problem than in urban areas where there are brownfields and there are rooftops where individual owners are willing to forego some use of that land. Land is what makes agriculture go. And so giving up land is a loss to them unless they are compensated for it. And that just adds a lot of complexity to that problem.
Thank you. This is a really good conversation. There are so many more complexities. I'm very happy with our decision to have held this for these conversations. I had no way of knowing how complex this is. Sadly, I have to move on to our questions from the rest of the participants. The first question is for Justin S. What data do you have proving that NEMA customers create a cost shift?
I think it's more the matter of the concept of the fact that the credits that need to be offset have to be supplied by someone. Now, I can understand and agree with parties that a further analysis would be beneficial to understand the actual impacts when we look at NEM 2 that the decision didn't, or rather the proceeding didn't have the opportunity to look at. But I think it's fair to say that there is, to some extent in any case, this aspect of a cost shift, even if it's fairly low. And it seems like there's an opportunity here that as we move into the successor, into net billing, that there's a way to streamline and in some sense systematize all the tariffs to be on the same page. I think we're hearing that again and again. Customers are trying to figure out which options do they have. and it's very hard to decipher among tariff which ones matter or which ones are they eligible for. So I think there's just an opportunity here that as the state is moving more towards a net billing tariff mechanism, that it makes sense to adopt that system-wide.
I just want to follow up to point out that agriculture is different than everybody else. And so I understand that the CNI customers, this might work for them. But for agricultural customers, the context and the situation is very different. One of the things that I point out is that the load swing from year to year for residential and CNI customers is usually 1 to 2% a year from the forecast. For agriculture, the load swing can be as much as 30% from year to year. And that's one of the things that makes agriculture unique. And the seasonal pattern, the fact that it doesn't run on a 7-day week for its load patterns, all of these things are important considerations that make agriculture unique, which is why NEMA was created in the first place and why the Farm Bureau pushed so hard for it. So it has attributes that need to be kept and need to be maintained as separate from the rest of the NEM tariffs. As much as the utilities might want to streamline it into something that conforms with what everybody else is getting in their NEM tariffs, the NEMA tariff needs to have characteristics that are separate from those tariffs.
Your Honor, if I could
Go
introduce
ahead.
Chad Cummings into this question. I asked him to join today because he's spent the past 10 or more years modeling actual projects for solar on farms and has a really good feel for what works and what doesn't. So I feel like, Chad, you would probably have comments on this.
Yes, thank you, Your Honor, for allowing me to be here. I'm a private consultant. I represent JKB Energy. I've worked with a lot of solar installers, but also represent a lot of private farms that have used and currently have systems under this tariff. Just to, I guess, throw in some additional context to some of the issues that have been brought up. It was listed in a November opening comments from the California Farm Bureau. They actually cited that in 2019, non-residential customers such as agriculture as a category paid $117 million more than the cost to serve them, while residential categories paid less than the cost to serve them. So just to throw a little more factual information into that topic, it's pretty clear there is no cost shift from a financial standpoint where NEMA customers would be having an unfair advantage by being able to be on the tariff. But I just want to say that probably 90 to 95% of the ag installations in the Central Valley really depend on this tariff. And when I'm talking about the customer types, these are multi-generational family-owned farms. This is not I mean, obviously there are some very large farming operations, but the vast majority of them are your, locally owned farms, and they're often located in low-income areas of the Central Valley. And this type of tariff allows them to manage some of their operating costs, and as a byproduct of that, continue to fuel the employment of those areas that they're located in. And a drastic shift to the NEMA policy could really jeopardize a lot more things than just what we might be looking at here. And I guess the point I'm getting to that Brad has alluded to as well, this is a complex issue. We don't need to go back to square one to restudy everything from the beginning, but there should be some kind of transitionary path without completely upsetting the apple cart, so to speak. I hope that helps give some context to at least putting a face to the customer type we're talking about today.
No, this is extremely helpful. And again, I guess a question I have that I've been having for the last half hour, 45 minutes, when did this this particular tariff grow to be outside of the ag community? Was the tariff designed to be looking at other entities other than ag? Because I keep going back to that agriculture, especially in terms of farming, is very different, has different seasons, etc. I don't know if Justin or Brad could speak to this.
I can take a stab at it if that was for me, Justin S. I will say that customers are always looking for the best option for themselves. And so perhaps something that may have started with the view or focus to support the agricultural customers, that others took the opportunity to say, hey, I could choose this as opposed to, say, VNEM. And because I have this small apartment building and I fit this definition, why not? Let me go ahead and do this. That way I don't have to worry about the dynamic. I don't have to worry about my fixed allocation. I can just get set for the dynamic allocation. So I would say that there's nothing in the tariff that precludes others. And likely when they're estimating what could be best for their particular usage, even though they may not be agricultural, they still found a lot of benefit. And that's probably what we're seeing a lot of when we look at the data, that it's not what we may have all expected to see 100% agricultural. You're seeing all these different customer classes because others have benefited from this tariff.
Well, I'd add though that most commercial accounts that are on NEMA are not eligible for VNEM. They do NEMA because they have multiple meters on the property and they want to do one solar system that covers the combined load of those meters. Schools and water districts are the biggest examples. Now it's true that when the bill was debated, SB 594, that created this, the discussion was about farmers. It was all about ag. But then it was soon after the tariff launched that schools, which also have very seasonal load and also have multiple meters, started to use it. And it makes sense for them for the same reasons it makes sense for agriculture.
Okay, and that was very timely as we were speaking about that. A question from two different participants were discussing that exact thing. While agriculture has a unique profile, schools also are distinct from other commercial customers. Shouldn't the PUC take into account school support of the grid during the hours and months when it is most stressed? So hopefully that answers that question. Anything to add to that from other perspectives? Justin, from Public Advocates, anything to add?
No, again, just harkening back to my remarks in the previous workshop, I think for priority situations like that, there is often actions from the state legislature to plus up dollars for those use cases. So we may not need to solve for every single use case like a school in the context of this proceeding.
Okay, great. Well,
Judge, might I just add one thought? While there's a lot of diversity in customer loads participating in NEMA, in terms of the value of the generation, it's still a function of time and is generated and captured as the avoided cost calculator. So I just want to throw out that the load of the host doesn't really meaningfully change the value of that generation. So really not so much about the customer base as, again, the generation or the value thereof. That's really more the concern, I would say, from the utilities perspective. In terms of the load pattern, the customer, there's no desire, at least from the IOUs, to restrict to any specific customer base. It's just really more the value of what should that value be when it is exported.
Okay. Any final comments from our panelists?
No, I just appreciate the opportunity to make a presentation to you about this. And I hope that you and others learned more about Ag's situation with this and our relationship with the NEMA tariff.
If I could
Thank
put
you.
one more thing on the table, Your Honor, in terms of the obstacles, the biggest thing I hear about is timelines. And this isn't necessarily unique to NEMA, but it is very much a NEMA issue where some customers wait literally a year to get onboarded and to get the billing set up. And I think it is, from my perspective, entirely an issue of utility staffing to actually do it, get it done in a timely fashion. And there are some other timeline related issues that are detailed, and I hope that we have the opportunity to discuss them, because I think we could actually, agree amongst parties of how to streamline some things. So hopefully there's some chance post-workshop to talk about things like that.
So just to be clear, are you talking interconnection timelines? Because I believe that, well, I know that I have another proceeding that deals with interconnection. I just want to be clear about that.
It is both interconnection, the interconnection application review, and the process can different things be done concurrently during that review. And then also, once there is an interconnection agreement, there's PTO, actually getting the billing set up. So that's not interconnection, it's the actual tariff, getting them established as NEM customers or net billing aggregation customers, whatever it might be. I think we really need to provide better customer service and have better customer experiences.
And even though it isn't related to today's specific tariffs, would that be a consideration in consumer protections?
Interesting thought. Perhaps we could talk about it in that context, certainly.
Okay. All right. Well then, thank you all. I have learned far more than I expected today. Definitely more than I had even hoped. So I appreciate all of you for spending the time to prepare and to participate. So thank you. And with that, I am going to move on to next steps. This won't be very long. I did see a question about next steps. I don't want to miss it. Okay, actually, I'm going to ask staff if you can go through the questions. There was a question on last steps. If you could find that and resubmit it. There we go. Thank you. So next steps. So my plan is to debrief with Energy Division, develop a set of questions based on our conversation here. And again, it's to help us complete the record for both the VNEM and the NEMA successor tariffs. And I want to issue a ruling probably early March that will include that set of questions to provide to all of you. And the point will be to respond to those questions in filed comments. I anticipate a proposed decision several months later that will address all of the remaining issues in this proceeding. There was a question that pretty much asked that, when will a final decision be made for agricultural clients applying under NEMA? Is it following the timeline of the standard ruling for mid-April, or is it going to be treated differently? I am hoping, again, I'm hoping to address all the remaining issues in this proceeding in one decision, as I said in the February 1st ruling. There will be an additional ruling following this workshop that will ask questions on NEMA, on VNEM, to get that information into the record. And again, I hope to have a proposed decision probably midsummer. With that, I'm going to ask for any final questions. Go ahead and type those in. I know that President Reynolds had to step out for a few minutes, but I'm wondering if she has returned and if she has any final comments before we adjourn for the day. And again, if there are any final questions, please feel free to type those in.
Judge, I'm not seeing President Reynolds in the panelists or attendees.
Okay, thank you. Any final questions? Going once, going twice. Okay, again, oh. So the question is, does the commercial industrial category shown on Justin's NEM aggregation participation stats include farming facilities on industrial commercial rates such as wineries? Justin, can you answer that?
Absolutely. So the answer is that if those are tied to a meter that has an agricultural or industrial residential rate, they would be captured. As long as they're in their arrangement, the data would have them embedded. Not as anything special. We're looking just at the race that the customers are on. So it would be inclusive of them as well.
Great. Thank you very much. And thank you for jumping in there.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, I don't see any more questions. I thought I saw a question. For clarity, will ag customers be subjected to the NEM 3 deadline in April? That has not been determined. Only those tariffs that the commission adopted in the December decision. So I would imagine if we are adopting a decision with respect to NEMA, that and it's not going to be adopted until August, that it would not be fair to have an April deadline for an August decision. So that will be determined in a final decision for this proceeding. And I'm hoping that answers your question. And I've been asked, Erica, could you put up the last slide again, please? This has staff contact information. So if you have any questions, and again, the staff deck will be available on the commission site. And this, again, this workshop has been recorded. That will also be, or a link to it will be available soon. And I believe that's all for today. So again, thank you all, and you'll be hearing from me within a few weeks. Thank you. Have a great day.